Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. If you would all take your seats, please. If the candidates for Lynn Haven Commission seats will please take your places here behind your nameplate, we would appreciate it. On behalf of the League of Women Voters, we are very happy to welcome you all this evening to our traditional candidates forum. Our municipal candidates are as important, if not more so, than many of the other elections that we think about, because of course here with municipal elections, these are the folks we can see. These are the folks we can talk to. These are the folks that we know are there in our communities and that are working on the residents' behalf. So this is a proud tradition that the League has over the last 100 years. As an organization, we have worked to make sure that people participate in democracy. And women have tended to always lead the charge of things that involve groups. Voting and elections is what we do together. And so it was in 1920, after the women received the right to vote through the 19th Amendment, that the League of Women Voters was founded. And so we are carrying on this tradition here in Bay County. We've been here since the 1960s. So it is our pleasure to bring the candidates first this evening. We have our Lynn Haven candidates. And because we do have a lot of municipal candidates this year, we have two forums going on tonight. We will have Lynn Haven first, our candidates for City Commission, followed by our mayoral candidates. And then we will take a quick break and do a shift to where we will bring in our Panama City candidates. So if everyone would please be mindful of the fact that we will be moving around and to be as respectful as possible. We will do our best to be as efficient as we can with our time this evening. These local races are all nonpartisan, and we know that people basically all want the same things from their elected officials. People want to know that their government works for them. People want to know that people that are representing them are fair and that they give adequate consideration for the things that impact people and that benefit the most people most of the time. Of course, as they know, you can't please everybody all the time, but doing the best job to try and represent the best interest of the community is something that is no small task. And we certainly appreciate that all of you are willing to put yourselves out for public office, because it does take a special kind of sacrifice to be a public servant. Since we have the number of candidates that we do, we will ask that you refrain from applause or verbal responses. We know there are supporters here in the crowd. We have campaign materials that the candidates have brought that you can access here and during the breaks. And locally, of course, we encourage our residents to access our candidates, to talk to them, to call them, because in the limited amount of time that we do have tonight, we can't do deep dives into issues, but we do want to give everyone an opportunity to meet the candidates and get an idea of what their stances are on some of the most important issues that are facing everyone. So we would hope that you would access their websites, their Facebook pages, or find ways to connect with them. I'm sure they all welcome that. So we are all here to listen to what they have to say. Just to let you know, no candidates are given the questions in advance. Each candidate will have the opportunity to answer an equal number of questions, and the order of questions will rotate so that each candidate will have a chance to answer a question first. There are no personal attacks on other candidates that we would accept. In this first session, we have our Lynn Haven Council candidates. And as you can see, there are 7 of them. And so there are 3 different races. And the way that we're going to ask this is there will only have a limited number of questions this evening. We will ask each of them to make an opening statement of 1 minute, and then our moderators will alternate in asking questions. We will start with the race to our far right, and I will have our candidates introduced. Initially, we have here running in seat 2 on the end, we have Mr. Richard Walker and Mr. Pat Perno. There in the middle, we have our candidates for seat 1, which is Mr. Joe Brown, Mr. Brian Lee, and Miss Brian Lee Gray, and Mr. Sam Peebles. And here on the end, we have the two ladies, Ellen Fields and Judy Vandergriff. The seats, oh, did I get it? Did I get it right? Okay. All right. And so because there are 7 candidates, we have, ladies, you will need to flip a coin. The other group of 2 will also flip a coin so that that will determine who will answer a question first twice, because we only have 3 questions that we have time to ask each of our candidates. So we will get to that. We do ask that everyone please make sure that your electronic devices are all turned off and that we don't have any sound distractions. And with that, I will introduce our moderators for the evening. We have league members, Ms. Christine Smallwood and Ms. Patrice Henderson. They will be asking each of you questions. They will alternate between the different races to ask questions. And our timekeeper there, Mr. Earl Henderson. Earl will make sure that each of you stays within your 2-minute time to answer your questions. If you have extra time, in addition to within your 2 minutes, you can return to a previous answer or rebut something that you have already heard. The candidates will each answer the 3 questions, and then we will have a 1-minute closing as well. So with that, we will go ahead and get started, and we'll have Miss Patrice Henderson to ask the first group of questions. I'm sorry, Miss Christine Smallwood will ask the first group of questions. The timekeeper will give you a 15-second notice of when your time is about up, and a stop sign when we would appreciate that you would complete your thought and move along. All right, then. With that, we will go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perna. Mr. Brown? Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Gray, or is it Mr. Lee Gray?
My name's Brian Gray, and my platform is simple. I'm not here to run against anybody. I appreciate y'all being here. Appreciate the League of Women Voters for the opportunity. It's good to have this many people step up, want to lead the city. Simply, I just want to restore trust through transparency and ethics. I believe that bedrock, not an act. Come to Lynn Haven in 1965. My dad moved down from East St. Louis, Illinois, which went through all the Lynn Haven, Mowat, Mosley, Gulf Coast, Lee Florida State University. I'm retired from the Florida National Guard, 31 years for combat performance. Retired from the probation and parole services as a probation officer for years. For the last 8 years, I've been a licensed mental health. Not a bad thing to have in Lynn Haven. I look forward to having an opportunity to serve Lynn Haven. I believe we should listen to all citizens at all times, easily accept.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. Mr. Peebles?
Yes.
I'm assuming we're good to go. Awesome. Hey, I'm Sam Peebles. It's an absolute honor to be here tonight. It makes me really happy to see all of you here because it means that you care about local politics. And like as it was stated earlier, it's one of the most important things because when the commission votes on something, it happens right then. But either way, I am absolutely honored to be here. I'm a third generation Lynn Haven citizen. My grandparents were here. My parents were here. I grew up here. Before I joined the Air Force, I spent all my time in Lynn Haven. My wife and I loved it so much, we moved back here because we love Lynn Haven. I have 12 years combined experience between active duty Air Force and Florida Air National Guard. I also have a background in risk management, which means I believe that I have the tool set that can help with things like stormwater. I'm also an educator. I was an after-school program teacher at Oscar Patterson Elementary School, and I'm also an adjunct professor here, right here at Gulf Coast State College. I teach on the second floor in this building. So with that, I just want to say thank you so much, and I can't wait for the questions.
Thank you, Mr. Peebles. Ms. Fields?
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming out. I know we have thanked the League of Women Voters, but I want to thank you, the citizens, because people don't realize without you, we don't get elected. So it's very important that we get our message across why we're running. I have moved to Lynn Haven 5 years ago. My husband is retired military, but he wanted to be by the Air Force Base. And we just picked this place and absolutely loved Lynn Haven. And we don't ever want to leave, to be honest with you. I never thought that I would get into politics, but here we are. I think that I could do a very good job on seat 4 because I have a lot of experience in administration. I'm a retired principal. I also have a BA in psychology. And, you know, to this day, no matter what I pursue, I still always try to learn, go back to college, and do my very best job. And I will do the very best job for Lynn Haven.
Thank you, Ms. Fields. Mrs. Vandergrift.
Hello, I'm Judy Vandergrift. I was born and raised in Bay County. I'm 4th generation. I have you beat, Sam. I am married to my husband, Don. We've been married 47 years. I have 2 boys and 4 precious, beautiful granddaughters. I have lots of managerial experience, and when I say lots, I'm talking about 43 years. I've been a principal. I've opened Surfside. I've opened University Academy. I know what responsibility is. I've managed a budget from $300 million, from $10 million to $300 million with the school system. I had the privilege of being the deputy superintendent for 6 years. I know what responsibility is. Thanks to the League of Women Voters, and thank you for coming.
Okay, thank you all for your opening statements. And we're just going to go down the line with as Ms. Shelley explained, with each seat, you're going to answer the same question, okay? So I'll start with you, Mr. Walker. Yes, you have 2 minutes. The first question is on term limits. A recently established city charter review commission has proposed a referendum currently before Lynn Haven voters to limit city commissions to 2 consecutive terms. Do you support this referendum, and explain in your answer why you do or why you do not?
I do support it. In fact, I was one of the original people that started the investigation into changing the charters. The only thing about the term limit that you're going to vote on is I don't believe, in my opinion, is that you should allow a person to continue more than 2 terms, okay? In the old days, the terms were 2 years. We could get rid of, bad word, we could get rid of a bad penny very easily. We just outweighted them. And this time, it's now 4 years. That would mean that they would have 8 years. But we still have 4 years to watch them and then vote them out after the 4 years. But there's one condition. The mayor, which is a commissioner, can stay in there and come back as a commissioner after 8 years. We were underneath a same government for 17 years. We could not get rid of that government. It took a long time to work it out. So, yes, I'm in favor of the term limits. I push for it. I have one correction. I would like the mayor, who is a commissioner, not to be able to continue on more than 8 years in both the commissioner's seat and as the mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Perna, would you
Okay.
like me to repeat the question?
Go ahead.
Do you support the referendum that's on the table? Why or why not?
Yes, I support the referendum. I support the fact that we're putting it before the people and letting the people decide. That's what charter review is all about, and this was researched by the Charter Review Committee. George Hines Jr. and your committee did a great job bringing forth the things that'll be on the ballot. It's up to y'all to decide. Personally, I feel like we already have term limits, because if you don't like somebody, vote them out. You know, if we're not working hard, the people decide what's going on here. So as far as someone's length of term to present, they've been voted in. You know, it's up to y'all to vote them out. It's up to y'all to vote on this term limit. And I will live and die with whatever y'all decide. So if the term limits are there, I hope I could survive the limit of the term. If not, Mr. Walker will be in the seat. So that's how I feel. So, you know, it's up to the people, and I'm just glad that we're putting all these things on the ballot for the people to decide. We've done our first charter review. I think the Charter Review Committee did a great job, and I'm looking forward to 5 years from now when the Charter Review Committee does it again. So I appreciate everybody getting out to vote on it. This is a very important election that we have these changes in front of the people. So I can't encourage the people of Lynn Haven more to get out and vote just for this. Not to mention you're selecting 3 commissioner seats and a mayor seat. So let's get out and vote, folks.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Walker, your question is on affordable housing.
Mr. Brown.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Brown. Prior to Hurricane Michael, there were several affordable apartment complexes in your city. Almost none have been rebuilt, and the emphasis seems to be solely on single-family housing. What can or should the city do to encourage a better balance of housing in the city?
Affordable housing is an issue that is on everyone's mind, I believe. It is a problem in Lynn Haven. It's a problem in all of Bay County. last year, the county did form an affordable housing committee to look into this problem, which brought in myself as a citizen. It brought in some real estate professionals, construction folks in the housing industry, some government officials. We've been meeting, have approved a couple of affordable housing units in Panama City to this point, not so much in Lynn Haven yet, but we're continuing to work on those things. Just last night, the Senate passed a bill which will greatly help with affordable housing, providing more funds for affordable housing, as well as providing incentives for local governments, for contractors and all, to be able to come together to build affordable housing. One of the main complaints in the past has been these monies that have been set aside for affordable housing would wind up in the state's general fund rather than in the affordable housing market. This bill will also prevent that from happening. So I think we're headed in the right direction. Like I say, that bill has already passed in the Senate. We'll be going to the House for their approval. Hopefully we'll get that approved, and we'll see a major increase in funds that are available both for first-time home buyers and to help the renters in the apartment complexes.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Gray,
Thank
would you
you.
like me to repeat the question?
Yes, ma'am, please.
Prior to Hurricane Michael, there were several affordable apartment complexes in your city. Almost none have been rebuilt, and the emphasis seems to be solely on single-family homes. What can or should the city do to encourage a better balance of housing in the city?
Well, thank you. I think the first thing we can look at is the cost of building permits, because in order to make affordable housing actually affordable, you have to be able to afford it. And if you can't afford the building permit, whether it be the citizen, whether it be the developer, whether it be the realtor, at $15,000 to build a house is a bit much, I would say. We got to also have the infrastructure to make sure that when we add more housing that we're not adding to the problems we already have. Maybe one solution might be a set of retention ponds, enhancing the retention ponds so we can clean out what we have, and it can be less of an issue going forward. We also need to put safeguards in, because of the grant money that comes in. We would need to make sure that it goes to the people it needs to go to, that it doesn't get siphoned off and put to other uses that we don't know where the money goes to. And I think by doing both of those, we can have better zoning, we can have better grant writing, because there may be grants out there that we just simply don't know about. And we also need to make sure that we have representation, as Mr. Brown was alluding to, the committees that are out there and the policies that are out there from Tallahassee. Sometimes they get passed and we just don't know about them. So we need to make sure that Lynn Haven's aware of what's going on. Also, there might be some changes that need to be made in the city budget itself. I was fortunate enough to be on the debt review committee when it was called the debt review committee, and we're making some good progress on paying down the debt, but we need to make sure that who do we owe, how much do we owe, and how we're going to pay it back. And every citizen should be able to have easy access to that information. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. Mr. Peebles, would you like me to repeat?
No, it's okay. I'll just answer. So first, I want to say I've thought about this a lot. Being in the military, I'm very familiar with the way that funding for housing works. And unfortunately, here in Bay County, a lot of the apartment complexes took advantage of it. Basically, what happened was the hurricane messed up some of the apartments, and they were able to legally evict all of their people in their apartments, and then upgrade their apartments, raise the cost, and then they knew that since this is a military town, they don't care about filling them because the military is going to cover the cost of those apartments. And so that has hurt a lot of families being able to afford apartments. And so I want to think a little bit outside the box here, because we've covered some things already, but I want to make sure if we can talk to the officials in the government and figure out how we can make this basic allowance for housing work to where we're not creating more inflation with apartments, because a lot of families have been affected by that, and it's not right. As far as housing, I think that it really truly comes down to basic math, which is supply versus demand. Okay. And so to bring down the cost of houses, we need to have more houses. Supply and demand versus, that's 101. However, we have to manage the infrastructure first, because if the infrastructure is not there, then no one's going to want to move here anyways, because their house is going to keep flooding. So you need to manage the infrastructure first, and then make it possible to make more houses in a managed way that we are managing it and making sure it's done properly. We need to look at red tape laws. We need to re-review those. We need to re-review permit fees and everything, and figure out what is right for the city so that we can make this the best city possible to build more houses, to bring up the supply so the demand and price goes down. Thank you.
Yes, ladies. I'll start with you, Mrs. Fields. The question is on growth management. The St. Joe housing developments and the works at Highways 231 and 390 will impact Lynn Haven's expansion. Since this is where the growth and property tax revenue will be, what are your thoughts or your opinion as to whether Lynn Haven should consider annexing more property in the city into the city limits? When you answer your question, please explain why or why not.
I think that annexing some of the outer cities would be a very good idea, because I think that the people that live outside the city don't feel like they belong anywhere. They're already using the roads, so why not incorporate them? It would give the city more revenue, taxes, water, things like that. I know some of them still have wells and things like that, but would have to be transferred over. But I think that the growth would make us able to take those roads and have alternate roads to go out of the county. And I think that would be a big plus when the county is, looking to expand. So I know that Lynn Haven is very limited in what they can propose. A lot of people complain, oh, there's traffic, we need traffic studies, but it goes right back to Bay County. And so that's where they think that Lynn Haven is not doing anything, but they are. It's just that sometimes their hands are tied by the next step of government up. And I think that the commissioners need to go and sit more on those meetings and advocate and help us come up with a plan and a solution. And I think, again, a lot of our citizens, they have great ideas, and we don't always listen to our citizens, and I'd like to really hear from them on what their thoughts are. We have a lot of retired engineers and, people that can help us and maybe go an avenue we haven't thought of yet. And so that's something I would like to see committees formed that our residents can help make those plans as well.
Thank you. Mrs. Vandergriff, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I like the other question better. Can I answer it? I'm kidding. Growth is going to occur. It's growing in Florida. It's growing in Northwest Florida. It's growing in Lynn Haven. So what we have to do is we have to manage the growth. Now, right now in place, they have what's called a comprehensive plan, which parallels Florida statutes for growth. There's the codes, and there's the strategic plan, which lays out a plan for Lynn Haven from 5 to 7 years. I think it needs to be longer. I think it needs to be 10 to 20 years. The biggest situation we have right now is making sure that we have the infrastructure for growth. And we are addressing those needs right now. There is in plans for the next 4 years, a $16.5 million project to expand and improve. So I think we have to manage our growth.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Walker. This question addresses the Lynn Havens Community Redevelopment Agency, or the CRA plan. It was established in 2003 to address economic development, future land use, transportation, downtown development, housing, recreation, and community aesthetics with funding from property taxes. With over $685,000 proposed in the 2023 budget, what projects have you or would you support for use of these CRA funds?
Good question. Not many people know about the CRA. I happen to be the director of the CRA Advisory Board for 2 years. It's been a long, hard haul. I was there at 2002 when it first started. I was there when it was told to us what it would be. It has never achieved what it was told to us. The board was sent up by all the elected officials, and they were supposed to be replaced by the citizens. They never were. However, during the years, they've changed the rules and regulations as to what the CRA could do. Did it accomplish those things? No. The budget at that time went from $0 to $300,000. Of that $300,000, $150,000 was the salary of the CRA director. Kind of cut into your money. However, it still persisted. The programs that were put in effect did work. We purchased property. We turned that property over to the city. The city used the property. We increased the storefront development, paint program. Lots of programs were put up. They did not function fully. The people did not take advantage of it. The money just stood there, and we built up a good principle. What happened is you had to spend that principle. Right now, the budget is at $600,000. That's the tax money you're getting in. You still have your outflow of money. You still have the same programs. You've enlarged it to a few other programs, which are good. The CRA is a good thing. It is coming up for review. People have to pay attention. There's a lot of things coming up for review, and you have to pay attention on whether you approve the CRA or not. I wish you luck in choosing well.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Mr. Perot, would you like me to repeat the question?
Go ahead if you like.
Okay. The CRA plan was established in 2003 to address economic development, future land use, transportation, downtown development, housing, recreation, and community aesthetics with funding from property taxes. With over $685,000 proposed in the 2023 budget, what projects have you or would you support for use of these CRA funds?
Mr. Walker, thank you for serving on the CRA. As a board member of the CRA, I've believed in some things the CRA has done, and I've not believed in some things the CRA has done. I think, Judy, when you were commissioner, you and I both voted no on those signs through Lynn Haven. And can you tell me what they, for the amount of money they were and where they are? It doesn't make sense. Incentivizing building the paint program is a great idea. We need more of that. We need to focus on rebuilding our historic plat in the right way through the CRA. We need to incentivize business growth with the CRA. We need to try to get more business in Lynn Haven. Well, we need more places to eat. We need more places to relax for people to enjoy their families here in Lynn Haven. More family amenity type stuff. So I think the CRA can focus on that. The CRA has built sidewalks. That's a great thing. I think that helps connect things. The CRA has the ability to buy some space, some lots, and create green space or parking. The biggest thing we need to do with our CRA is to rebuild Florida Avenue. We already have a grant for $4.1 million to rebuild Florida Avenue. the CRA funds can help accentuate that grant and do things. So I think our CRA is challenged, and I think the CRA should look at the focus of business growth and the Florida Avenue as one of the biggest projects we could do. So that's how I feel. Ben Jenke is our CRA, he's our economic development director, and he's always swinging at the fence, and I wish him the best. There's just a lot of potential there with the CRA, and we need to use that money wisely.
Thank you, Mr. Purnell.
Mr. Gray, and I apologize, Mr. Perno, we were supposed to swap out and start with you.
Oh, that's okay.
So I'm going to, at least I have the ability to just kind of go to the next one here. Mr. Gray, the question has to do with diversity, inclusion, and equality to some degree. There have been recently some things in the city of Lynn Haven that have highlighted a need for these issues. If you were to be elected, what can you as a commissioner do to do specifically to foster a more open and accepting multicultural climate within the community of growing diversity and within the city government as well?
Thank you. I think the first thing you need to do is to establish trust between the commission, City Hall, and the public. Because if the public doesn't trust its leaders, they won't give their opinion on what needs to be done. If there's a problem to be solved, we need to find out from the citizens, not from big corporations, not from state government, not from county government, but from the citizens in Lynn Haven, because we may have issues that we don't even know about that are unique to Lynn Haven. I think also as a commissioner, you have to be able to understand what people are going through and to understand what the needs are out there. I mean, you can listen to problems, you can come up with solutions, but unless the people actually see change, they're not going to believe it's going to happen. And I just think we need to be flexible to respond to the citizens' need, whether it's a phone call, whether it's an email, to actually follow up and to ensure that everybody knows what's going on. Thank you.
Mr. Peebles, would you like me to repeat the question?
I think I have it. Thank you. So for me, I think the main thing that needs to happen is, like Mr. Gray said, ultimately, is we need to make people feel heard. But I think what we really need to focus on is not just sit back and wait for people to come to us. We need to be proactive and go out into the community and ask them. Because how are we supposed to know? Like Mr. Gray said, if someone does not feel welcome at a commission meeting, why in the world would they show up? So we should be proactive, go out into the community, canvass the community, figure out what's going on. We can't just sit at a commission meeting and hope that someone comes to us and tells them they have a problem. Some people have the courage to do that. They do, but other people don't. So we want people to feel welcome. We want people to feel heard. And to do that, we have to extend our hand to them so that they can feel comfortable and talk to us. Now, it would be our job as a commission to be a filter to take in all that information and figure that out. As there's so much diversity in the city of Lynn Haven that there's no one size fits all fix to all of it. So we have to take in all the information. We have to filter it. We have to figure out the best way that people can feel heard. We have to figure out solutions and be solution minded. Figure out what the solution is. Don't just figure out what the problem is. Figure out how to fix it. And that's a lot easier said than done. And we have to work as a team. And it is not the commission versus the citizens. The citizens and the commission are a team to work together to make Lynn Haven a better place. And so us as a commission need to be proactive, talk to the citizens, whether that if you find out that they like social media better, do that platform. If you think that they would rather you go to their house, go to their house. If they like a phone call better, do a phone call. Figure out what it is, make them feel welcome, and figure out what the issue is and find a solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peebles. Mr. Brown?
Would you repeat the question?
Yes. If elected to the commission, the issue goes to what you would do specifically to foster a more open and accepting multicultural climate within a community of growing diversity and within the city government.
Similar to what my opponents have said, I think trust is a major factor there. We've got to build trust between the elected officials and the general public. We do live in an area which does have a diverse population. A lot of good ideas can come from them. We've got to reach out. The elected officials have got to reach out and try to engage the general public as much as possible. We don't have right now very many people who are involved with city government as far as coming to meetings, being willing to serve on commissions or boards. It's a never-ending struggle to get enough people to serve on a board. I've been on the CRA board for the last 4 years, and until about a year and a half ago, we never had a full board. So we've got to reach out. I think a lot of growth in Lynn Haven, a lot of new folks in Lynn Haven that have a lot of good ideas. As people I've talked to and going door to door, a lot of good ideas from places that they've lived before, some things that we can possibly start to use or start to explore. So I think basically just the trust and being available to the citizens will go a long way to build that diversity and get more citizen involvement.
Thank you.
Mrs. Vandergrift, this topic is on the septic versus mandatory sewer. There has been a significant increase in homes in Lynn Haven, many of which have septic instead of sewer. Should all new homes be required to tie into sewer instead of septic? And explain in your answer why or why not.
I believe right now the requirement is if your septic tank and you live in Lynn Haven, when it's time for you to repair or, I don't have a septic tank, so I don't know the terminology, but when it's time for you to clean it or repair it or rebuild it, that's your option to transition to the sewer lines. I'm in favor of the entire city being on the sewer lines. And the reason for that is environmentally. There are regulations now that says that within so many years, by I think 2032, that all of the sewer that must be reclaimed and utilized, that it can't be dumped into the bay anymore. So all of this and the seepage from the tanks at the houses, we need to eliminate that. We have controls over the sewage from the city. We can reclaim it, we can clean it, where, our goal is for it to be 90% reclaimed and used throughout the city. Reclaimed means it goes into the facility, it's cleaned, and then it's sent back out and utilized in sprinklers and so forth. And that's our goal in Lynn Haven, is to because it'd be environmentally beneficial to everyone. I would just like to comment about what they were talking about too. We have apathy in our cities. We need more involvement. And I have to stop. Okay. Well, I'll come back to that point.
Thank you, Ms. Vandergrift. Ms. Fields, would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
There has been a significant increase in homes in Lynn Haven, many of which have septic instead of sewer. Should all new homes be required to tie into sewer instead of using septic? And please explain in your answer why or why not.
I think that the newer homes that are in communities, I think that they should be part of the new plan where they're tied into the city. But I think that a lot of homes can't tie their septic because they have bigger parcels. So it's very costly in order for you to dig and join them to the existing infrastructure. So that's a question I can't say yes or no on. I think, again, that the newer homes should connect, but people should also have that option if they don't want to, that they should be able to have their own. Again, if you're in an HOA, no clapping. If you're in an HOA, it's mandatory that you hook in. And that's where the city, they have. And so that's where I think it's a very good problem because you can fix it in a community. Again, if you live outside of an HOA and you want to have septic, I think that that's a good choice for you to have, and you can make that decision.
Thank you, Ms. Fields.
Mr. Perno. Tying into the question, because it's kind of unfair to not give everybody the opportunity despite having a time constraint, but this is a similar question that I think citizens would like to hear you on. Citizens are always concerned about stormwater runoff during heavy rains. According to some reports, stormwater runoff is the worst pollutant in the bay and negatively impacts recreation and marine life. What changes to Lynn Haven's stormwater management program do you believe should be made to improve your stormwater control, and who should pay for it?
Great question. Stormwater is at the forefront of our concerns of our citizens in our city. We, as a commission, faced stormwater head on, and for the last 4 years, we've, I would say, diplomatically decided to give an assessment through your property tax on your impervious square footage for stormwater. That money's been pooled and it's been split up and paid for 25% of projects that we've received HMBG grants for. So Chris Lightfoot, our Public Works Director, is working on several projects that have been funded through the stormwater assessment. The 7th Street Ditch project, they've tore up 7th Street and gone straight from the bay back through 77. They're still working their way down to create better stormwater management in the historic plat. We were just in Tallahassee today. We were taking a swing at some legislative appropriation. Actually, it's only fitting that I have here the plans for the east side stormwater retention area. We're trying to get this done. It's on the back of Mowat Highlands. It's just up from the King Griffin Park on the right. This is 27 acres. We've just got the land donated back to the city from the Regency Corporation. It was a wetland. We can turn this into a 3-tiered pond. It can solve 300 acres worth of stormwater. It would solve Mowat Highlands problems and Pine Forest problems. It would help a third of our city. It's stuff like this that we're trying to do to face stormwater head on as a commission. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perno. Mr. Walker, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, quite familiar with stormwater. I live in a 1922 house, and when they decided to double the density of the community in the CRA area, all their stormwater came off these new roofs onto the old properties. Luckily, my house was they had foresight in 1922, and they put it on stilts. They knew what was going to happen. and it's happening all over. I agree with Mr. Pono here. We do have a very extensive stormwater program underway. The problem with it right now is it is underfunded. He's right. We're going for grants. We're looking for it. Mr. Lightfoot is very aggressive, very aggressive. I enjoyed talking to him about the program. It will work if we allow him to get the money. That is the problem. The problem was doubled by the fact the company that was hired to set up the revenue failed. They even told us that we could not support the services that we have in the program. So now we have to look for alternate avenues of taxation or money, which we are doing. They are doing. I have to say that the program is moving. I'm very informed about this because we are at sea level. Whenever it rains here, we have one problem. Whenever it rains, the sewer pipes, the sewer covers are 12 inches in the air. That's raw sewage mixing in with going into the bay. We recently dumped 500,000 gallons of sewage into North Bay in 2 locations. We recently cleaned the tanks in Lynn Haven and dumped that into the ditches and flooded and killed the fish in certain areas. Yes, these have been identified. I agree our water program, stormwater, is making progress. As we were told we have to do something. Well, we're trying. I'm sorry about that.
Thank you, Mr. Walker.
Mr. Peoples? This question has to do with court enforcement. What should the city do about non-conforming properties within the city limits?
Well, first, let me say that I'm fundamentally against codes that do not make sense. It is not our job to be someone's parent. It is not our job to tell them how to live. It is government's role to be a referee. And what that means is there are going to be some codes and ordinances, and we need to review them and make sure that they make sense, right? Now, the real answer to this question is we need to do a full review of the codes and ordinances that are in place. Some of them just simply don't make sense, and they're very hard to read, and they're not intuitive. So we could potentially have codes enforced on us that shouldn't be enforced because it reads in a way that doesn't make sense. We need to go back, look at the codes, review them. That has started, but I think we can expedite it. I want to personally do that myself. I want to start an initiative to go back and look at the codes and ordinances and review them, make sure they make sense. One, you don't want to enforce something on someone simply because it's revenue generating. That's anti-American. That is not the point of codes. The codes is safety for other people. So if it is not safety for other people, if it is only there to generate funds, it should not be there. Also, it should not be wasting time. If it doesn't make sense, you're wasting time for the citizen and you're wasting time for the government. If the ordinance doesn't make sense, I'm wasting time figuring out what I'm allowed to do. The city's wasting time figuring out what's supposed to happen. But as far as homes go, we do need to relook at those because there are potential codes that need to be re-reviewed. There could be something that just simply doesn't make sense. And the true answer to that question is we need to re-review the codes and make sure that they actually make sense specifically for the city of Lynn Haven. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peebles. Mr. Brown, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, thank you. Well, I do agree with Mr. Peebles that we do need to constantly be reviewing our codes. For the most part, we do need codes in order to protect citizens. Safety is, as he mentioned, a big factor. I don't think any of us want unsafe conditions near our homes or whatever. And, we've got to have some form of rules and codes to go by. While I do agree that many of these codes are probably outdated, they've been in effect for years, there probably are some things that we can do to update those as far as modernizing them to meet the current needs. I think that we have some codes which, like I say, are antiquated to be honest, that continual review is something that we need to look at, but we definitely need codes and code enforcement to keep our city safe and attractive.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Gray, would you like me to repeat it?
Oh, no, thank you. First of all, as far as code enforcement goes, I think it's imperative that we treat everybody the same, equally across the board. As it stands now, if you get into a bind with the code enforcement, the city hires a magistrate. And guess what the magistrate does? Rules in favor of the city. Sometimes there could be an underlying issue why people don't get things done that they need done. A broken step, painted, stuff fixed in their house, because it's very onerous to get a building permit. Suppose you need to replace your floor, just flooring plank, no electric, no sewer, nothing like that. You got to get a $75 permit. And one of the ideas I heard was, oh, well, we need to update that, and if you don't get a $75 permit, we're going to give you a $75 fine on top of that. Well, that's not solving anything. That's just hurting people more. We don't need a citywide HOA, that's for sure. We need to have our rules and have our codes specific to Lynn Haven that works for the citizens of Lynn Haven. If it gets to the point where we need to go out and talk to people at their house, that's great. Let's do that. Let's find out what the problem is and how we can help them solve the problem instead of hammering them every time. That's not the solution. The solution is also not getting bigger government, more money, so that we can grow and grow government. The government that governs the best is the government that's the less. Growing government is not the way to do it. Sure, we need to make sure people are safe and that things are brought up to code and maybe review it, as Mr. Brown alluded to. That's true. But we also need to make sure that we're, like I said, no citywide HOA and treat everybody the same across the board. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oops. Don't kill anybody, woman.
Okay, tails. I win. Okay, so she goes first. That's not really winning, is it?
Mrs.
Okay, I'm the
Fields?
winner.
Okay. This is the last question. Have there been any decisions the city commission has made recently with which you strongly disagree? If so, please explain what you would have done differently, not just your strong disagreement.
Well, that one would have to be back in December when Commissioner Tinder requested a special meeting with all the commissioners. I felt that she was a commissioner. She asked her fellow commissioners to please, have a chance to speak. And I was in the middle with this. I didn't take either side because I felt both people, Commissioner Tinder and Chief Ramey, should have had that special meeting, and they both would have had a chance to have their say and resolve that problem. And that's a big sore spot, I think, in the city, because it caused a lot of anger, anxiety, and mistrust. And I don't think it has gone away since then. And I think it was not fair to Ms. Tinder that in the end, the chief did get representation. She was not allowed to bring her representation. If I was on the commission, I still would have followed the same protocol, and I would have gotten an attorney to come in and speak for the city. And that's where I'm trying to say that it was the right thing to do, but it was not fair to Commissioner Tinder in order for her to have her say. That was very unfair, and I think that's something that if we don't stop doing that, we're just going to keep running into the same problem where people are angry, okay? That was my answer to my biggest problem. There have been many decisions that I think were sometimes the wrong decision, that they could have tabled things, but that decision to me was just unjust.
Ms. Vandergriff, would you like me to repeat the question?
I think I can remember it.
Okay.
I've been on the commission now for about a month, and I found the commissioners and the mayor to be very caring and intelligent individuals. We research everything. We meet, and it's an open meeting. We can't meet. We have to always meet in the sunshine. We try to give the citizens of our city an opportunity to speak. But what concerns me is that a few citizens might keep bringing the same topics up, but yet it's not representative, it's not representing the entire city, because we have apathy in our city. When only less or around 18% of the city votes, you know, a city election is extremely important because it's the city that immediately impacts your lives. You know, much more than the national one. I mean, the national one does, but the city one immediately affects your lives. So we need to have more involvement. We need to hear from the citizens. We need to hear from more citizens. So we have an accurate picture of what is not making our citizens or what is making our citizens tick or what they like or what they want. And transparency, yes, we need transparency. We need to be open. You know, one time I had a professor that said, what makes the biggest impact on people is when you go to things that you don't have to go to. That shows people that you care, and that shows people who you really are. And so I think we need to make more of an effort to get out among our citizens and really find out what's going on and what they are thinking. You can have those 15 seconds.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We really appreciate you all coming this evening and answering questions for your constituents, all the people that live in your area, not just those people that may vote for you. But we are happy that we get a good turnout this evening. We are going to shift fairly quickly because we have our mayor candidates coming up. Once again, we would like to remind everyone that the candidates are accessible to you. They want to hear from you. They want you to approach them and if you have additional questions and need more information, because our local communities are where we can engage our officials. So thank you again, and we hope that everyone has good luck in the upcoming race. Next month, April 18th is Election Day. So those of you that come out to candidates forums tend to be super voters. So we know that you will encourage those around you as well to make sure to participate. Watch for the dates are coming up that we have for early voting, and the deadlines for voter registration are coming up. So if you all would please attend to those important dates, we would greatly appreciate it. Monday the 20th is voter registration deadline. Saturday the 8th is the last day to request to vote by mail ballot, which all requests have to be made again this year. They have expired. Monday, April 10th is to Friday, April 14th is early voting, and Election Day is April 18th. Let's give all of our candidates a big round of applause. Thank you. They don't get a closing? I'm sorry, our time does not permit us to have a closing today. So, again, we hope that people will. Our time is a bit limited this evening. Again, we apologize, but there's a lot of candidates, and that's a good thing. Our Lynn Haven Commission candidates just were here, and hopefully you all were able to get some good information from seeing all 7 of them together, 3 for one race and 2 in each of the other 2 races. And so now we will have questions for our candidates for mayor. And just to remind everyone again, we would ask that there not be audience responses to the candidates' questions. Each candidate will have the same number of questions, and each candidate will have the opportunity to answer the same number of questions first. So with that, I will reintroduce our moderators, Patrice Henderson and Christine Smallwood, and our candidates that we're happy to have here this evening are Judy Tender and Jesse Nelson, who are both contending for that chief spot. And we know this is a dedicated group of folks that are interested in putting themselves out here for public service. It is no small sacrifice, and so we appreciate their willingness to be candidates, as we do appreciate all of you as citizens as well for coming out and listening to them answer questions about things that we believe people care about. So in addition to what we're able to hear from the candidates this evening, we hope that you all are willing to access them through their websites, their Facebook pages, find out how and where you can get more information from them because they do value that input from citizens. That's what makes our governments great. So with that, we will remind everyone that our candidates all have 2 minutes to answer questions, and our timekeeper, Earl Henderson, will remind you when there are 15 seconds left, and then we'll flash the stop sign when your time is up. And with that, we will go ahead and start our questioning. We'll alternate. We'll start with Judy Tender and alternate alphabetical order. What's supposed to be alphabetical order? Nelson before Tender. So we want to be fair. Yes. So, and then if you need the question repeated, you can ask it.
Okay. Ms. Tender, my question has to do with the St. Joe housing developments. The St. Joe housing developments in the works at highways 231 and 390 will impact Lynn Haven traffic. What steps are being taken to accommodate that growth? What roles does or should Lynn Haven play in managing the impacts of growth outside its city limits?
That's a good question. First of all, 231 and 390 are both county roads, state roads. Lynn Haven, we can request stop signs and stop lights along those highways, but that's about it. Even at the entrance of Mowat Highlands, I believe it is, we asked for stoplights there because people were having a hard time getting in and out, and especially with the new developments going in right next door. They were denied. So when it comes to Lynn Haven, per se, we can ask and for things like that, but it doesn't mean that we're always going to get them. I'm a little bit nervous about this development, how it's going to impact traffic, and I can only assume that based on the location where they're putting that is so that Air Force people can hop on 231 and go across down Cherry Street and whatnot down that way. So I don't know. I think it's going to impact traffic. I mean, we have a school out on 390 that certainly impacts traffic. I tried not to go to the beach and not go down 390 towards 231. That's what I do. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tender. Mr. Nelson, would you like me?
Yes, if you could repeat that question for me, please.
The St. Joseph housing developments that are going up at highways 231 and 390 will impact Lynn Haven traffic. What steps are being taken to accommodate the growth, and what role should Lynn Haven play in managing the impacts of the growth?
I think the major step that's being taken right now is Department of Transportation is actually widening Highway 390. So that's one of the steps that's being taken to accommodate the extra traffic that is going to incur through that new development. And so as a city, we try to always make sure that we're in contact with our county officials and with our state officials to let them know about the issues and concerns that we're having on the changes that they make and how that can impede upon our citizens as well. And so I think that's one of the biggest things that we can do is just continue to advocate for our city, to let them know the issues that we're having with some of the changes that are being made. Again, that road is going to be widened, which also will help alleviate stormwater in certain areas because now you have some new ditches that will be going into that area as well. And so I've been able to talk to certain HOAs, like the Landings, for example, and have encouraged them and connected them to the State Department in order that they may talk about is there some alleviation that they can have for their stormwater as they're actually widening the road. And so people do need housing. Recently I was out at the Tender Air Force Base speaking with Colonel Watkins, the commander there, as well as some of the other mayors as we did a mayor's tour. And one of the things he looked at all of us mayors and asked for was that we would help them with the housing crisis that they're going to have at Tyndall whenever they have new airmen and families to come in. And so they don't have enough houses at Tyndall in order to house the airmen that we asked them to bring in because we asked for Tyndall to stay in our community. And so I think there is some responsibility that we all must take as a community to make sure there's housing there for those that want to defend our lives every day.
Thank you.
Second question, this one goes to you first, Mr. Nelson. The proposed budget for the year 2023 is a little over $71 million. Obviously, you're the current mayor. What budget deficiencies or problems do you see? And what ideas do you intend to implement if elected to increase revenue or minimize cost?
That's a very good question. I'm very proud, not necessarily that we have this great big budget of $71 million, but actually several million dollars of that budget is actually grant funds. And so it's not that our citizens are being taxed in order to fund that $71 million budget. Our city managers, staff has done a great job of making sure that they're out applying for grants in order that we can provide some of the services and pay for some of the things that we're actually wanting to get done in Lynn Haven without using their local tax dollars. Of course, we know that grants and other funds we were tax dollars at some level, but we're not using their ad valorem taxes or other fees and permits in order to provide those services that we're trying to accommodate here in the city of Lynn Haven. I think our biggest deficit that I see in our budget is funding our stormwater. Stormwater is actually an enterprise fund, which means that it should be funding itself. However, every year we're having to borrow money from our utilities in order to fund stormwater, which eventually, as I've said many times in our city commission meetings, is going to create a poop problem if we keep taking from utilities. And so although we complain about flooding, the last thing you want is some type of sewage backup in your home because that's a real issue. So I could stand a little bit of water to be in my yard more so than I can for feces to be in my bathroom. And so I think one of the things that we really have to focus on is making sure that we can fully fund stormwater so that we won't have to keep borrowing from utilities, so that in 20 years we won't be saying the same thing about utilities that we're now saying about stormwater. One of the things that we did decide to do as a commission, although it was not a popular opinion, was a stormwater assessment. Did we get it right? I don't know. It's actually something we're reevaluating. And so when we decided to do it, I did ask the commission if we could take it year by year. And so we're trying to relook at that and make sure that it's fair to everyone in regards to paying for the stormwater so that we can try to alleviate that and fully fund that budget.
Thank you. Ms. Tender, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I've got
I didn't think
Thank
so.
you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Just as Mayor Nelson has referred to as the assessment, I was on the commission when we voted that in, and it was a very difficult thing to do, but more so after we completed that, I was receiving calls every day about the unfair way it was done. Had a lot to do with people who own vacant lots, people who bought property to pass on to their families and to pass on to their children. They were being assessed huge amounts. And again, it was supposed to be about permeable water and how much cement you had and how many square feet your home was on your property. And the people who owned vacant lots were paying through the nose, and their property was soaking up all the water. I received calls from people who had their house on stilts. One lady in particular had quite a large house. It was on stilts. There was nothing. Her ground was soaking up everything. And she called and said, what can I do? You know, this assessment is really high. Well, we referred her to the appraiser's office. And basically, they told her, well, if you'd like, we will reappraise your house. If you'd like, it's going to jump. So she was in a catch-22. She says, don't come out. I'll pay it. But, I mean, the way it was handled and certain things about it, I think, need to be revised in order for it to be fair. Now I've forgotten the original question.
It was about the budget.
Oh, the budget. Oh, yeah, the budget. When I was first elected in 2017, I believe our budget was 31 million. It's over doubled. I think just like in any situation with finances, we need to take some of this money, move it around, and make it work for us. We just keep going out and getting more grants and getting more grants and taking more loans. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tender. This next question is for you, Ms. Tender.
Mm-hmm.
What can your city do to foster a more open and accepting multicultural climate within a community of growing diversity and within city government?
Well, I love this question. Thank you. I think the main thing to create acceptable culture is to change our culture, number one. I think we have to realize and understand and appreciate everybody. Everybody has a different outlook. Everybody has a different perspective from their lives and how they live their lives. I think that when it comes to something as simple as our prayer that we say before a commission meeting, I think all religions should be asked to do that prayer. It should be Buddhist, I don't care whatever it is. I mean, I think we need to accept that. I think that gay people should be accepted. Black people have had a hard time for many, many years, but it's visible. When you're gay, it's not always visible. There are people that have many autism and things of that nature. You don't always see that on their face. I think we have to change our culture to look at somebody and realize they're a human being, number one. They're God's child, number two. And they've got their own issues. And I think we need to look at them as people. And we have to appreciate that. We have to appreciate it in meetings. And I think if people knew that we felt that way, we would have more interested people in the government, because that we all make it up, It's not just one type or another. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tender. Mr. Nelson?
Same question.
Yes.
All right, thank you. In regards to, diversity, inclusion, equality, and especially with making Lynn Haven a more multicultural community, I think I sit before you as proof of that. Although Lynn Haven may have some historical identity as much of Bay County may have, but I sit before you as an African-American mayor of an 85% majority white city. You're not going to find that anywhere in Florida, probably nowhere in the United States of America, that you're going to have an African-American leader that leads a majority white city. And so Lynn Haven is 85% white, 10% black, 5% Asian, Native American, Hispanic. And so when I hear about the diversity, inclusion, equality, I think one of the things that I can continue to do as being a mayor is just continue to be myself. I think it's obvious that I'm African American. I'm 39 years old. I've been African American all of my life. And so, you know, and so it's just me being myself. And so by me being who I am, I naturally bring about diversity, inclusion, equality just by being myself, that through my conversation, through my thoughts, is to make sure that everyone has an opportunity, that everyone is treated fairly, that everyone can feel accepted. And so that's just me being me. And so again, I'm very proud to be the mayor of Lynn Haven, Florida. And it's always amazing when people realize who the mayor is, where the city is, and the demographics of our city. And I think that's something that Bay County should be proud of. I know we have a history here of Bay County, or at least a history I've heard about before I came here in Bay County, but to be able to say that there's a city that has a black mayor that's majority white, much majority white at 85%, I think that lets us know that we've come a long way. This is not the 1950s, the 1960s, not the 1890s. Are things perfect in our area? No city is perfect. My hometown, Dothan, Alabama, is not perfect. However, we are growing in making sure that everyone has opportunity.
Thank you.
Next question, I'll start with you, Mr. Mayor. As this is something that impacts, obviously, in your seat. What should the city do about non-conforming properties within the city limits? And how is code enforcement working? And what needs to be changed?
In regards to non-conforming properties, code enforcement, I think that's one of the issues that we're dealing with now as a city commission as we're working through the International Property Maintenance Code. Certainly that's something that's not popular with many of our citizens. As we got to our second reading a few weeks ago and was getting ready to vote upon that, heard from a lot of our citizens that, hey, could you really review this in a little more detail? Because there's some codes in there that may not be applicable to what we are having issues with here in the city of Lynn Haven. And so I think part of the challenge is that although a property may be non-conforming, with it being non-conforming, is it just non-conforming because it doesn't fit the aesthetic look that we desire in Lynn Haven, or does the non-conforming create some type of safety hazard? Safety is certainly first. No, I might not be a fan of a certain way people paint their houses and things of that nature, but we certainly don't want anything that is going to create a hazard to our community as well. But if it's something that creates a hazard, making sure that we have codes in place to ensure that we can provide safety for our community. And so as we continue to work through the International Property Maintenance Code, is looking at that in very much detail to see what is in there that applies to our citizens, what is in there that we want to give the code enforcement officer the authority to be able to go out and to address. And so certainly we're not trying to infringe upon anyone's rights with that. And I think that's the challenge sometimes, is sometimes our nonconformity is really a representation of our individuality. And so whenever we're infringed upon through that nonconformity, we feel like that someone is violating our rights. And so we're making sure that we're not violating anyone's rights, making sure that we're not doing anything that's unconstitutional, that we're not violating anyone's private property rights. And so I think as we go through that, much of it must be looked at a case-by-case basis. So although I might think it's nonconforming, we have to look at it at a case-by-case basis and make sure that it fits the standards of what we're expecting, but safety being one of those priorities.
Thank you. Ms. Tender, same question.
Thank you. There's a few different things in place now. If a resident lets their home go completely and it becomes unsafe, we have code enforcement can go out. We've done this. I know of a particular property that sits on the water next to a $700,000 home that they couldn't sell for a long time because this property was falling apart. The people that lived there, they didn't care. They had boats, they had cars, they had trucks, they had everything. They had swimming pool with no water, but floating mosquitoes everywhere. Code enforcement went out. They refused to do anything. So the police department converged on them. We sent out employees from the city. They worked there for, I think it was 3 or 4 days, just to clear out some of the problem. Now, then we take a lien on the property. The city has a lien on that particular piece of property. And unless somebody buys it from the tax roll or whatever, when that gentleman or that family passes away, that money will come to the city. We will own it and probably have to tear it down. Tear it down and sell it for somebody else. So we have that in place. Code enforcement, my thing is, I always say this. We have to think of the future. We have to realize that the same people are not going to work in code enforcement that are working there now. I get calls from residents and have all along. One lady had a brand new swimming pool put in, and it was above ground, 4-foot pool. We have a code enforcement law that says you have to have a 4-foot fence around your 4-foot pool, and they had an encasing around it. She bought the pool, spent quite a bit of money, and she ended up having to go to in front of the magistrate for the magistrate to say, no, this pool is legal. It's got a 4-foot fence around it already. They don't have to have another one. I don't think we can infringe on people's freedoms with a lot of the international code. I think I'm not for that at all. Thank you.
Ms. Tender, this is for you again. Okay. Citizens have voiced concern over the lack of compliance with the permitting standards by the Planning Board. What are your ideas to improve compliance and transparency in the permitting process?
Wow. That would be outstanding. I took interest in one particular case where they cleared off almost 9 acres of land, cut down all the trees, started bringing in dirt, piles and piles of dirt, and still didn't have a permit. They hadn't even filed for a development order. And so I kept going out there and counting dirt and taking pictures and sending them back until we finally, our building department said, stop. It's a stop work order. So they couldn't bring out any more. They turned around and brought out more dirt a week later after they had a stop work order. So I just feel that one of the things, and it's a very minute thing, but I said this today, I say it almost every day, with all the things that are being brought into Lynn Haven, new restaurants, whatever they might be, I think we owe it to our residents to have a sign out front of those things saying, future home of. I have people call me every day asking me what's going in that building on the corner of 12th and 77. I can't tell them. I don't know. Because I think they built the building and they don't have a business going in it yet. I think the way the permitting is done needs to be a little bit more transparent for everyone. And the planning department, their job is to run it past that group of people, on the planning board. And then they present to the commission. And I think it's just important that we become a little bit more transparent about who's building what and why. And I think that's the main issue for me. If they follow the rules, but you got to stay on top of it. You can't just say follow the rules and then walk away, because there are many people who don't do that. Thank you.
Mr. Nelson, same question.
Yes, could you repeat that question again, please?
Citizens have voiced concern over the lack of compliance with the permitting standards. What are your ideas to improve compliance and transparency in the permitting process?
I think one of the biggest things that we can do as a city to ensure that there's compliance with the permitting process is really communication. I don't think people intentionally go out and say, I'm going to build something, I'm going to renovate something, I'm going to remodel something, knowing that I'm supposed to get a permit for it and I still don't do it. So I don't really think that's the heart of our residents in the city of Lynn Haven. Oftentimes I just think it's not knowing what we're supposed to get permits for. For example, recently I had a lady to contact me because she wanted to buy a storage unit for her home. And so she was trying to decide, should she buy a 10 by 16 unit or 8 by 16 unit? Now the difference between that would be the 8 by 16 unit could be built off-site and then brought to her home. The 10 by 16 unit would have to be built on-site. Now, she could have easily gone out, purchased that, they would have built it on site, and then code enforcement might have drove by and said, hey, are you supposed to be building that? So what I did is I called the planning department and asked, is this something that she's supposed to get a permit for? Because she didn't know. The person she was purchasing it from did not know. And so I think a lot of it is going to require communication on our part. Can we make, put up PDFs on our website so that when people go and look to see if it's something they're supposed to get permits for, to see what am I supposed to get permits for? Can we even review? And I think that's something we can do. If I'm reelected as mayor, that's something I will ensure that we do, is reviewing what should be permitted and what shouldn't be permitted. Some things may be simple that you don't have to permit in order to get done. I do know that also with the permitting process, because people don't know what's supposed to be permitted. My wife works as a realtor. I assist her as a realtor at times. And so one of the things we ran into is that people could not sell their homes because sometimes the lender would look at the permits and say there are open permits on this. You decided to renovate your home, but you did not get a permit for it. And so I think that creates issues. So I think our biggest thing is making sure that we're communicating with our citizens what is compliance, and then making sure that we're able to follow up with them to making sure they comply.
Thank you.
So as not to go over on time, and since you didn't have the opportunity to provide an opening statement, we're going to provide you the opportunity to give us your closing statement. And just, 1 minute, and unfortunately, I'm going to start with ladies first, Mayor.
All right.
Thank you. I would first like to start by saying thank you to the League of Women Voters. I love coming to this. I've done it before. And I think one of the things I was elected on the commission in 2017. I'm co-owner of Victoria's Last Bite on Florida Avenue. So I got big fish in that Florida Avenue thing, and how that's going to go. I think the biggest and most important thing in Lynn Haven right now is regaining the trust of the people and letting people know that we care. And if we don't care, that's just going to keep on manifesting itself. I'm more of a people person. I'm certainly not a numbers person. I can tell you that. I count on Jamie Warwick for that. But I think our main thing is to give the city back to the people. That's the biggest issue. Thank you.
Mr. Nelson?
Thank you all for the opportunity tonight. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for my supporters that are here tonight. I really appreciate you. And the only question I want to ask you is, are we better today than we were 2 years ago? 2 years ago, there was a question about restoring public trust. And as I hear from citizens in Publix and Simply Seafood and Walmart and other places, they're proud of the way that we've been able to restore public trust since I've been serving as mayor of the city of Lynn Haven, which has been my honor for this past 2 years to do that. 2 years ago, we had concerns about debt, the charter, citizen input, stormwater. 2 years later, we are better than we were 2 years ago as we've addressed those issues. Do we have some ways to go? Sure we do. But we have a plan in place to continue to address those issues. And so I just ask that you would consider reelecting me on or before April the 18th so that we can continue moving forward together. We've done a lot of work so far in these past 2 years, and we have a lot more work to do. And I'm going to need at least another 4 years to make sure we get it all done. So again, thank you all for this opportunity. God bless you. God bless Lynn Haven.
Let's give our candidates.
Yes, thank you both.
Again, we're going to make a quick transition into our Panama City Forum. We greatly appreciate all of our Lynn Haven candidates for being with us this evening. And we hope that all of you will take interest in getting information from them and finding out more to be able to cast our votes on April 18th, on or before April 18th, which is our municipal primary day. Next, we'll have our Panama City Ward Commission candidates, please, for Ward 2 and Ward 3. We appreciate that you all are here late this evening. We're running just a little behind, but we do want to give all of our candidates an opportunity to present themselves this evening. So we thank our candidates and we thank all of our citizens that have taken the time to be with us this evening and to get more information about those folks that will be representing Panama City. Let me remind everyone, please, to turn off your electronic devices. We've had a few distractions here, so please put your devices on silent. The League is proud of our 100-year tradition of providing information to our voters and encouraging our citizens to be engaged in our civic life. It does take people that are interested for us to have responsible candidates. So we appreciate them all for being here. We're going to start this evening with our commission, Panama City Commission candidates. We have candidates vying for seats in 2 of our Panama City wards. Ward 2, we have candidates Michelle Bryant and Janice Lucas, who we are very proud to say are both League of Women Voters members. And we have the gentlemen from representing Ward 3 that are contending. We have Mr. Granger, we have Mr. Mr. Rader and Mr. Lang. So as was the prior format, we will have each candidate have an equal number of questions that they will answer first. The moderators, Patrice Henderson and Michelle Smallwood, will make sure that each candidate gets an opportunity to answer each of the questions. You will be answering just questions within your commission group. So the 3 of you will answer the same question, then we'll go on to the next group to answer the same question as well. You will each have 2 minutes for your responses. Our timekeeper, Earl Henderson, here in the front, will give you a sign when there are 15 seconds left, and then we'll flash the stop sign when your time is up. We do ask that the audience not provide responses. We are here to all listen to what our candidates have to say and hope that everyone will be respectful of that format. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. After each of you has a chance to answer 4 questions, you will each have a opportunity for a 1-minute closing statement. Okay, so with that, we will turn it over to our moderators.
All right, good evening. And just since it's Women's History Month, men, we're going to start with the women, okay? All right. And I guess since we're doing it alphabetically, I'm going to start with Miss Bryant. And the question that we're going to start with focuses on affordable housing. Since Hurricane Michael, there are fewer affordable housing options in your city, our city, and as a whole in Bay County, but focusing again on your ward and your district. How do you assess the new complexes or development, and how is this meeting the need for working families? And what are your priorities in using the city's federal neighborhood stabilization program known as SHIP funds?
So that's a great question. And first, I'll start off by saying thank you guys for having me here today. My response is I think the buildings that are currently coming up in the city will be a great filler for working families. The park in Masalina, the senior complex that's coming up on 15th Street, these will be great additions to the city. But of course, we need more. As we've heard other candidates mention, we need to support Tyndall. We have families who are currently not able to live in the city. So we need some additional affordable housing. And some of the things that I have seen working in other cities is providing a variety of options for affordable housing, owner financing, working with builders and developers who are willing to come in and provide housing in areas, especially in Ward 2, where there are some ordinance and zoning issues that prevent housing from coming in. Another great thing that I believe the city is currently working on is the infill program, and property that is currently owned by the city being turned over and having developers come in and build on those properties. So if we put all those programs in place, I think we could definitely reduce the lack of housing that we have here and increase the number of people that are able to return and have affordable housing available.
Thank you. Ms. Lucas, you need me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
All right. Again, it's focused around affordable housing in your area or district. And it's since Hurricane Michael, there are fewer affordable housing options in your city, Bay County, as a whole. How do you assess the new complexes or development, and how is this meeting the needs for working families? And what are your priorities in using the city's federal neighborhood stabilization program known as SHIP funds?
Thank you, and thank you for having us here this evening. Hurricane Michael did destroy a lot of housing, but the affordable housing problem was a problem prior to Hurricane Michael. It has been made worse as a result of Hurricane Michael. And the current properties that are underway are going to help, but we need a wider, a more scalable solution to the problem. And I had thought that we just need more private investors to come in and we can make it work. But what I'm finding after having attended the Florida Housing Coalition conference last summer is that those communities in the state of Florida that are really addressing the problem in a long-term, faster way, and it's not going to be fast enough. But those communities are making headway because of public-private partnerships, where people come together to put the funding in place, where they have programs and projects that reduce the costs of building. Land is a big cost. And so there are properties that the city owns that could be put toward making homes affordable, working with the private industry to do that. Infill development is another possibility. What often happens, and what's easy for a government to do, is to make the parcels, put enough parcels together to interest developers. Developers come in, buy those parcels, and bring in housing. And that is a good solution. But what about for the people who are already living in those neighborhoods? They get priced out. So that's where the public-private partnership have to work together in order to create the housing for those who are already living there. And that's where our SHIP program helps a lot. And they've been doing a wonderful job of helping many people afford homes who couldn't afford it.
Thank you. Moving on to Ward 3, and again, we'll go in alphabetical order and saying my ABCs. I think that puts Mr. Granger first. Do you need me to repeat the question?
It's the same question. Then.
Same question. We're posing the same question to Ward 3 about affordable housing.
Yes, please go ahead and repeat the question.
A different question? You want a different question? I thought we were asking them the same question. I'm just checking with you to make sure that we're asking a different question or the same question. Okay. I'll pass it on to Ms. Henderson, and I apologize.
Man.
I thought we were asking the same question.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. This has to do with term limits. In Lynn Haven, they've proposed term limits for the city commission members being voted on. Is this something you would support for Panama City? Why? And please explain why or why not.
All right. So I absolutely support term limits. I think that there should be a 12-year cap on municipalities, like within Panama City, right? So commissioners, I think, should be capped at 12 years, and I think mayoral candidates, or the mayor, should be capped at 12 years as well. I also will go a step further and say that I think that if we're gonna cap that, then we should have the mayor serve for 3 years instead of 2 before they have to go and start campaigning again. The reason I support that is because if it's good enough for our state legislature and it's good enough for our governor, then why is it not good enough for our municipalities? It allows for other people to step up and serve the city. So that's why I support that. Thank you.
Thank you. Same question, Mr. Lang.
Okay. Yes, I also agree with term limits. I believe that term limits are important in any political system because it limits the time that a person can be influenced by special interests as well as pet projects within whichever government agency you're talking about. I believe in an 8-year term limit, and personally, for county commissioners, or city commissioners, I'm sorry, and county commissioners. And I agree with Brian that I think that the mayor should also be limited to 2 4-year term limits, but he should also not have to run every 2 years as well. It's hard to get things done when you're having a campaign every other year. I believe that when we don't have term limits, that people become too comfortable in their position. Sometimes they get complacent in their position, and complacency and comfort don't always, congruent with growth and progress. So yes, I believe in term limits.
Thank you, Mr. Lang. Mr. Rader?
Hello, thank you for having us this evening. I have to, that's a very good question you ask about term limits. And I've thought about that many times over the years. And my predecessor that had the Ward 3 seat was there for 23 years. And I believe Mayor Jerry Clemens was there for close to that same amount of time as well. And I understand what you're saying about complacency. I can tell you that personally that I've not become complacent with my position. I'll never take it for granted. My feeling on term limits is it should be up to the public. If they want to vote you in, they can vote you out. Just that simple. That should be your term limit. No outside interest group has ever influenced me. So, I believe it should be up to the voters to make that decision. I do think that it's hard for the mayor having to run every 2 years, because as these gentlemen have both said, you're constantly thinking about having to run for your position again and raise money again. And it takes away from your time of being a great elected official. That's my personal opinion. It should be up to the voters. Vote you in or vote you out.
Thank you, Mr. Rader.
All right, moving back to Ward 2, and this time we'll start with you, Ms. Lucas. And the question is in regards to redistricting. After the 2020 census, boundary lines had to be redrawn to balance the voter counts within our city wards. What do you think of the process and the outcome?
So certainly I support the redistricting process that's necessary in order for there to be the opportunity for all voters to elect commissioners to the city of Panama City. And this was started in the early 1980s when ACURE undertook the task of taking the city to court in order to allow for the election of a more diverse city commission. And so the outcome was that single member districting was created. And so I supported that then, I support that now. The outcome of this particular redistricting has accomplished what was set out, and that was to bring parity so that those who are in our community have an opportunity of electing a diverse city commission.
Thank you. Ms. Bryant?
Yes. So I'll start off by saying that I absolutely agree that redistricting is sometime required, especially for Panama City, where we saw a decrease in numbers for specifically Ward 2. What I'll say I do not agree with is when you redistrict and you don't allow the citizens to be a part of that process and have a level of understanding of the process. We have redistrict in Ward 2 as of December 2022. And as I have been canvassing, meeting with many of the individuals that live in the ward, they're unaware that they have been redistricted. They are in a new ward. They're unaware of the changes in regards to where they're going to vote. So it's kind of caused somewhat of a distrust in the process when it comes to voting. And so while I agree with redistricting, I think if the city had the opportunity to hold off redistricting until they were able to put out a platform for people to be aware and to be a part of the process, then it would have went over a little bit smoother. So while redistricting is needed, there needs to be a clean cut off from one area to the next so all citizens are aware where they reside.
Thank you.
Okay, this next question starts with Ward 3. Mr. Lang, this has to do with ethics. Ethics has become more of a concern to citizens in recent years, with ongoing investigations of corruption within government bodies. As former officials have faced legal consequences over self-dealing and violating the public trust in contracts and managing funds. What steps do you support to ensure more transparency and accountability in city management and procurement?
Well, I believe that politicians in this country have forgotten that they work for the people that vote them in, and not the other way around. I believe that when you extract tax dollars from hardworking people, those tax dollars need to be allocated in the best way possible to get the citizens' return on investment for their money. And the city commissioners, the mayor, or any political politician should be held accountable for that money. I think embezzlement's been a problem in Panama City. I think we're reeling from a recent embezzlement. Hopefully the forensic audit that's coming through will give the people of Panama City a sense of security that their money is being spent in a cost-effective manner. I believe that that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Lang. Mr. Rader, same question.
Okay, would you repeat that, please?
Yes. With the corruption in government bodies and former officials that have faced legal consequences that have violated the public trust, especially in managing contracts and funds, what steps do you support to ensure more transparency and accountability in the city management and procurement?
Well, first of all, I'm very proud of our city management and our staff with the city of Panama City. You know, when I first got elected, I didn't understand. We don't micromanage. That's not the commissioner's job. That's why we have a staff. That's why we hire a city manager. There's only 3 people that serve at the pleasure of the city commission. That's the city manager, the city attorney, and city clerk. When I first got elected in 2007, I went to the Florida League of Cities convention, which is all about home rule. And I'm the president of the Bay County League of Cities. And home rule is so important because it allows you to create things that fit your hometown. There's no one size fits all for every city. So, with that being said, the first thing I did was take the ethics course on the Sunshine Law as an elected official. And now we are required every single year to take the ethics course on the Sunshine Law. And Florida has one of the stiffest sunshine laws in the United States of America. I know for a fact. And I serve on the resolutions committee for the state of Florida for the League of Cities and help draft bills to go to the state legislature. And I understand about what it means to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars. It's of the utmost importance. Trust. We trust our staff. That's where it comes from. And what Mr. Lang was referring to, I know, and I can say this freely, it was on the news tonight. We had a situation where a city employee, Mr. Michael Johnson, was arrested. And there's been a lot of figures thrown around. But you know what? He only took $126,000 that we know of. The 11 homes the city got back. If you want to add the homes in there, that's fine. And he entered a plea deal today, and all of the money is going to be going to the children that deserve it for after-school assistance programming. There's more to that, but so that is good ethics, and I'm proud of our PCPD for their forensic work and the forensic audit that we've had going in process right now.
Thank you, Mr. Rader. Mr. Graninger.
So in my 20 years in the Air Force, one of the things that was pressed on me when I first joined the Air Force was integrity first. And so ethics has always been a part of my life, even prior to that. But in everything that I do, I try to keep ethics in the forefront there. So in office, there's 3 things that I would try to champion in order to bring transparency and accountability back to Panama City. One of those things is a 10% random audit of budgets within each section. So we'd have an auditor go in, take a look at 10% of the budget, and if they can come up with where that's at, the rest of it is probably, statistically speaking, good. If they can't, then we dive a little deeper. This is a standard practice that's used elsewhere. I used it in the Air Force, and it works very, very well. Another one would be, we have an auditor within Panama City, but I would like to have a private auditor work hand in hand, similar to a public-private partnership, to where the private side's kind of keeping the public side ethically responsible. And then the last thing would be to make the budget easier to read. I mean, if you go online and look through the budget, I mean, you can find the website where the budget's at. It's on the Panama City website, but it's not very easy to read. And I don't think that the average citizen is, when they look at that, they know exactly what they're looking at, because it's very, very difficult to dive through that budget and see it. All I wanted was just to download the entire budget so that I could pour through it, and you cannot do that. So those are the three things that I would like to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, starting with Ms. Bryant. This question is in regards to the City Commission and any decisions that they've made recently with which you strongly have disagreed. If so, please explain what you would have done differently.
So I only get 1 minute.
Two. You've got two. 2 minutes.
I need about 7 or 8. So no, a really good question. And I'll start off by saying that our mayor and our current city commissioners have done a really good job with assessing what's been going on with the city and really gauging the temperature of the citizens. As far as a couple of the decisions that I haven't always agreed with, one of them is regarding the fire tax assessment. I think I mentioned just a few minutes ago about the redistricting. And third, I would say overall use and funding when it comes to the CRA. And Mr. Rader just mentioned about what has happened today with the previous executive director, Michael Johnson. There needs to be changes to how we as a city manage those type of situations where they don't occur. Within our city, we need our leadership to be able to focus on one role or the other. We need a commitment from the citizens where not only do we have our commission, our mayor, we'd also have input from the community and create a community advisory board that can assess and assist the city, not necessarily from an audit perspective, because you know that requires another level of deep diving that may not be on the citizens level, but absolutely making sure that when they're making decisions, that these decisions truly reflect the majority of the citizens, as well as we're showing that they're being fiscally responsible and making the best use of our dollars. I'll piggyback just a little bit since I have a little bit of time. When it comes to the fire tax assessment, while it was super important for us to recover after Hurricane Michael, I think as we've begun to progress, we've gotten grants, we've been able to move in a upward mobility. There should have been a deeper dive as well as some input from citizens who were or who have been deeply impacted by the fire tax assessment. So those are my 3 issues that I would have taken issue with over the past couple of years, and hopefully going forward, we'll get more input from the citizens.
Thank you. Ms. Lucas, do you need me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
All right. And it says in regards, excuse me, in regards to the City Commission and decisions they've recently made with which you strongly disagreed, if you could explain what decisions they've made that you disagree with and what you would have done differently.
So I think my concern has more to do with the focus of the commission on making broader decisions citywide in terms of. So essentially, over the years, there's been a philosophy that has to do more with bricks and mortar and big development than with helping the everyday citizens, the Ward 2 citizens, to better understand how to develop their own properties and their own situation. And I've said it this way, that there's an investment that we need to make in people and programs and not just in bricks and mortar. And so investing in people and programs looks like staffing our community centers and not just having the buildings available, so that we could work together within the community. At one time in the community, there was staffing not only at the MLK Rec Center, but also at the Glenwood Community Center. And so as we work to try to bring programming into the communities, there needs to be an ongoing staff. As we're redeveloping Joe Moody Park, for instance, there's an opportunity to work to bring an urban ecology center there, but that would require staffing. Again, people and programs, not just bricks and mortar. And so I think the philosophy that guides many of the decisions, and as I spoke earlier about putting together parcels of land that attract developers that ultimately can lead to gentrification, as opposed to working with infill development. Now, there is a project that the city has adopted that would allow that, but we need more folk who understand how to develop their own properties and more citizen education in that regard. Civic engagement is a key factor upon which I'm running, and that is to get more citizens educated about how our government works, and so that they can be a part of making decisions, and we can cut down on that low percentage of people who actually vote.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Rader.
Yes.
This has to do with the Panama City Mall.
Okay.
What is your understanding of the plans for the Panama City Mall? Are there any particular proposals that you support or oppose? And please explain them.
You know, unfortunately, the Panama City Mall took a major hit financially. Things come in cycles when Pier Park was built. And then we had Hurricane Michael. And if you look at the real picture of it, okay, I believe in property rights. Dillard's is owned by their own company. JCPenney's is owned by their own company. The rest of it is owned by investors. And you drive by, you see a sign, Herndon Properties. The only plan that have been privy to was at a commission meeting one time, and a gentleman representing the mall showed up, and he said, we have a plan. What we want to do is to keep Dillard's in place, JCPenney's in place. We want to make a lot of green space with trees and walkability. We want to build market rate apartments. We want to have shopping similar to what they have at Pier Park. So, you know, and that's kind of been a trend across America. But, you know, things come in cycles. We all know that. So my feelings is they own it. That's their property. You know, they're the ones that are suffering by not making any money on it. We need it. We need bustling property going there. But look across the street at Bay City Point. Look how wonderful and successful that's been, you know. And that's why it's so important on the next ballot for all of us to consider, and strongly I support the tax incentive program, because that helps developers with their pockets, because, I mean, this is deep pockets anymore to buy property and develop. And so that would help the Panama City Mall, and they would qualify for that, those owners there.
Thank you, Mr. Rader. Mr. Graninger, do you need me to repeat it?
Yes, please.
Okay. What is your understanding of the plans for the Panama City Mall, and are there particular proposals that you support or oppose, and explain yourself?
So I agree with Mr. Rader in that Panama City Mall is private property, and the city really shouldn't, other than for safety issues, should not really intervene in that area, because that would be fairly tyrannical. I do disagree, though, with Mr. Rader in that the Panama City Mall developers they're not the only ones that are suffering. So with all of the stores inside the interior of the mall that are missing now, the citizens of Panama City are losing that 1% merchant fee. And while that has been made up to some degree by the Bay City Point, the mall as it stands is hardly generating any of that, with the exception of Dillard's and JCPenney, which are great. Dillard's and JCPenney have both committed to stay, which is great. But the interior, what connects the the anchor stores together, one of the problems that the developer is running into is all the infrastructure within the mall. The majority of it runs overhead. If it was all underground, then they would have already knocked the building down. But it's all overhead, and since it's overhead, you can't just go in there and knock it down without impacting Dillard's and JCPenney. So, yeah, I mean, I think we should probably look to incentivize the developer to come in and do something with that mall. But I don't think it should ever come at the expense of Panama City citizens. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lang.
Well, I think Mr. Rader and Mr. Granger both hit on the topic that really limits the city's ability to do anything with that property, is that it is private property. I don't think that hinders or doesn't allow us to work with the developer or whoever owns it to try and work toward a mutually beneficial development for the city with that property. But there's really no way you can force a private property owner to do to develop their property and without their consent.
Thank you.
All right, this is the last question, and we are starting with Ms. Lucas. And this is specific to your ward, and it's kind of broad, and you've only got 2 minutes. So, what do you consider the greatest assets, and by contrast, the greatest challenges for your particular city ward?
So first and foremost, the greatest assets of Ward 2 and of the city are the people. And when we invest in the people, particularly providing those educational approaches to understanding how to work together, then we can grow. Now, there is a focus, and it has been for many, many years, on attracting talent to our city, and that's important. However, we need to cultivate the talent that's already here. And so providing those bridges and opportunities for citizens to better themselves and to connect with the resources. In this region, the Great Northwest, there is a skills gap. So we have people who need jobs and work, and we have folk who have businesses and they need people to work them. And so the difference is that we need to provide the programs that help people to bridge that gap from where they are to where we need them to be in the community for us all to do better. So by and large, the greatest asset are the people. The greatest challenges, likewise, can be the people and the mindset. And so we have to work to provide with them, not in terms of a handout, but a hand up, ways that they can connect with what's already available in our community. And so we've been doing that in the work that we've undertaken in the last 8 years to bridge those gaps, to make available to small businesses, to make available to people and to children the opportunities to get the best of our community and choose the paths that move them toward the best. So the challenges are bringing jobs and economic development not only into Ward 2 but in the city, but most specifically into Ward 2, so that we can invest in people and programs and thereby build up everyone. If we're going to have that premier city, we cannot do it if we leave pockets of our community behind.
Thank you. Ms. Bryant?
Thank you. Can you repeat the question for me, please?
Absolutely. What do you consider the greatest assets, and by contrast, the greatest challenges of your particular city ward?
Yeah, I have to echo what Ms. Lucas just said as far as the greatest asset for Ward 2. It's absolutely the community, the people that live in the ward. These people have great heart, great courage, all the things that they've had to endure over the last 20 to 50 years. So I'll say the biggest asset is the people that have stayed post-Hurricane Michael and post-COVID. The opposite of that, or the negative side of that, is what we need to continue with that legacy is livable or creating a livable community within Ward 2. And I'm speaking specifically Ward 2, but this could absolutely be for all of the wards within Panama City. People want to be able to live, work, and play in their community. And in Ward 2, that's one of the things that's lacking in the community. Most people in Ward 2 do not have access to transportation. Many of them wanted to attend tonight, but they could not because the transportation system shut down before this event would end. And so we need to pour some equitable resources into Ward 2. We need to improve the housing. We need to improve the availability of jobs in Ward 2. We need to provide sustainability to keep people and wanting people to move into Ward 2. We've had housing programs and meetings with various people within the community, and many people want to come back to Ward 2. So what we need to do is provide those resources. We need to provide that education and allow people to live, work, and play in Ward 2.
Thank you. Can't count, but I can do my ABCs apparently. I thought we had already asked. So at this point, I believe we've asked 4 questions apiece, and I thought we had one more question to go for Ward 3. Did you count 4 questions apiece? Look, I'm a lawyer. I don't do math. Just saying.
I can't remember. We didn't do 4. I think we had 3.
I thought so, but
Yeah.
I'm not. I've been over here. So we're going to ask one last question to the gentleman of Ward 3, and then again, I remind you, you're going to get 1 minute for a closing at the end. Okay?
Okay, this last question has to do with the budget, and Mr. Lang. The proposed city budget for this fiscal year exceeds $122 million. Total projected expenses are close to $139 million, leaving a shortfall of over $16 million. How should the city make up this shortfall, and what opportunities are there to either increase revenues or minimize costs?
Thank you for that question. The one thing I hope the city doesn't do is feel like throwing money at every problem is the answer to every problem. You know, like you said, approximately $11 million budget is a large budget with 3 income streams that the city has that most don't. And a lot of the cities around Florida don't have. We have the merchant tax, we have the fire assessment, and we have ad valorem taxes. I think when you have a budget that big and you have 3 income streams producing that much revenue for a city, that you really need to look at the spending within the city and make sure that your spending is in line with the revenue that you're generating. Increasing taxes or adding assessments, levying assessments on hardworking taxpaying citizens that are already being hit by inflation and the rising cost of homes is just not always the answer within a city. And I hope the city understands that and literally looks at the expenditures and the way that they're spending their money as the answer for the budget shortfall.
Okay, Mr. Rader, same question.
Would you repeat that, please?
Yes. The city budget for this fiscal year exceeds $122 million. The total projected expense is close to $139 million. So there's a shortfall of over $16 million. How should the city make up the shortfall, and what opportunities are there to increase revenues or minimize costs?
Well, first of all, here's what people have to realize, and it's a work in progress. When we have a project to do that we're in arbitration or in litigation with FEMA, we hope to get those funds, okay? That's going to help with that problem. We lowered the millage rate this year. Unfortunately, there's a word called inflation that's hit every one of us in this room and in America. That's hurt us bad. I've been here long enough to know that budgets can be amended. Just because you have that big of a budget doesn't mean that you can't amend it and reduce it at any point in time. And we do that. You have to have the right people in place. You're in your logistics department and with Team Haggerty that we partnered with to solicit these grants and funds. Yes, it costs money to use them, But if we don't use professionals, we won't get them. And if every I is not dotted and every T is not crossed, you won't receive anything. And I've heard nightmare stories from South Florida, Central Florida, about after hurricanes and how they messed up with their application process. So, you know, budgets can be amended. Yes, it's higher than it's ever been, but we lowered our millage rate. Yes, we did. And so we have to find ways to cut. Yes, we do. And you know what? We will. We will. And I believe there's no substitute for experience when it comes to that.
Thank you, Mr. Rader. Mr. Green?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
The city budget exceeds $122 million. The expenses are $139 million. So there's a shortfall of $16 million. How should the city make up the shortfall, and what opportunities are there to increase revenues or minimize costs?
Okay, so when I was reviewing the budget, I saw that your numbers there are absolutely spot on, and taxes make up $24 million of that revenue, just $24 million. I also noticed that the city is paying $7 million in debt just for principal, and that we're also paying $2.6 million in interest. So if we didn't have any debt, that could be another $9.6 million that we didn't have to pay. So that covers some of that 16. I would say that FEMA, when I was stationed in Biloxi, we had Hurricane Katrina come and hit. So I have a little bit of experience with FEMA. And FEMA is very much an organization that you have to dot every I and cross every T in order to get them to do anything. But one of the things to work with FEMA is you can rebuild back exactly the way that it was before without changing anything at all, and it streamlines the process. Now, when I say streamline, that doesn't mean it's very fast, but it's a lot faster than going to arbitration with FEMA. So I would suggest that we would stop borrowing money, first of all, and then I would suggest that when we're dealing with FEMA that we cross every T and dot every I so we do not go into arbitration with them.
Thank you.
And as a courtesy, despite it being Women's History Month, we're going to start with the Ward 3 gentlemen with their closings. And again, we'll start in alphabetical order. So we'll start with Mr. Granger, and you only have 1 minute.
This is final words?
Yep. 60 seconds for final words.
All right. So first I want to say thank you. Thank you to everyone who showed up. I know this takes a lot of resources and a lot of effort to put on, so thank you very much for providing us the opportunity to come up here and speak before you. I hope you heard tonight that my answers were forward-thinking and that my heart is in serving the citizens of Panama City. When in office, I'll be communicative and transparent. I believe in a strong, fiscally responsible Panama City, and that is a great foundation on which together we can build a Panama City where our children don't have to leave in order to achieve their dreams. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lang.
I'm Bruce Lang, and I'm really concerned about the direction that our country's headed. And I'm really decided that if I was going to try and make a difference, that I didn't have the resources or the influence to really make a difference at the state or federal level, but that I could make a difference at the community level. And if we're going to heal our country, I really think we need to start at the family, rebuilding the family as a foundation of our country, and then transition quickly into rebuilding our communities. I believe that if you elect me, give me the privilege of representing you as a Ward 3 commissioner, I will run on the tenets of not increasing taxes, lowering taxes as your home values go up. We're going to try and decrease your millage rates. We're going to re-look at all the assessments that are levied on you. So we're going to work towards working with the fire chief and the police chief to maintain safe streets. First responders are trained, and they can provide the services necessary to protect you in the community. Thanks.
Mr. Rader.
Repeat it one more time, just a closing statement.
Just closing. 60 seconds. That's it.
50 something. Thank you for coming out tonight. You folks you're the heartbeat of our city, the life support system, the people that care that are here. I love our city. This city has embraced my family through the years because I moved here in 1978. And this is my way of giving back. I don't consider myself to be a politician. I'm a public servant. I received a phone call from a lady this morning, 85 years old. She wants her ditch cleaned out. You know what? That means the world to her. I immediately get on my pony and get the picture sent over there to Mr. Jonathan Hayes, our Public Works Department. You do your job. You answer your calls. You take care of your constituents. Whatever their problem is, it's important to them. FEMA offered the city $44,000 to repair 20 miles of streets. That's a slap in the face to the citizens of Panama City. And that's why we took them to arbitration. You can't do it for that price. You have to stand up. You have to be strong. It takes good leadership to be strong. And I am very thankful to have had the opportunity to serve our citizens. I don't take it lightly. And I humbly ask for your vote in Ward 3 on April 18th, and I will continue serving to the best of my ability. God bless all of you.
All right, Ms. Bryant.
I may need an extra minute. But no, thank you guys for all coming out. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for having us out here today. I will end by saying that a vote for Michelle Bryant is not just a vote for a disabled vet, but someone that will be a change agent for Ward 2, someone that wants to fight for true affordable housing in Ward 2 and create a livable community. And while Ward 2 can definitely not go back to the past, but create a future for not only this generation, but future generations. And so, again, I humbly ask for your vote on April 18th. For Michelle Bryant for Ward 2. And also I'd like to add that whatever pony that the city gave Commissioner Rader, I would like that pony too in pink.
You just get on it and go. You just get on it and go.
Last but not least, Ms. Lucas, please.
Thank you again to the League of Women Voters of Bay County for having us here this evening. I thank my opponent for being in the race because this is what makes people want to get involved. It's when they look at the folks who are running and they know them and they want to be a part of helping to make our city a better place. Civic engagement, citizen engagement is better now than it was 4 years ago, and we can thank Hurricane Michael for that. That disaster brought us together. And so it's important that we continue that by continuing to bring the citizens to the table. The city did a good job with the charrettes, with getting everyone involved, making that available to everyone. And so I want to continue that. I humbly ask for you to vote Janice Lucas for Ward 2 so that I can continue doing the work with the citizens of this city to help make Panama City a better place. Together, we can make it happen.
Thank you all so much. I'm going to hand this over to Ms. Shirley.
We so appreciate our candidates. We appreciate our candidates and, of course, all of our audience members here, especially for the lateness of having you all out this time of evening on a weeknight for a civic forum. But if you would please bear with us, we would now like to call up our mayoral candidates, Mr. Brednicki, Ms. Lewis Williams, and Dr. Rohan. If you all would come up, please, we will make a quick transition. And again, we appreciate all of you that are able to stick with us to hear from our mayoral candidates. Your seats. We're going to go ahead and get started. Again, we appreciate that you are here at this late hour to make sure that we give our mayoral candidates an opportunity to address our Panama City residents as well. So we would like to reiterate that we would ask that everyone please make sure their electronic devices are silent, and also to let you know that we are here to hear our candidates, so we hope not to hear responses from our audience so that we can get the most from our time that we have to listen to them. So our two moderators, Ms. Patrice Henderson, Ms. Michelle Smallwood, will be asking questions of Mr. Brudnicki, Mr. Rohan, and Ms. Lewis Williams. And we also would like them to know that each question you'll be given 2 minutes to answer each question, and each candidate will be given an equal number of questions to answer first. So when you conclude the questions, I believe we have 5 questions that each of you will answer, and then you will get an opportunity for a closing statement. So with that, we will go ahead and get started with our first question.
All right, and as we've done in the prior questions, if you were here for that, we're just going to start in alphabetical order. And we are out of order unless we are calling you Miss Williams. So would you like to be called Miss Lewis Williams or Miss
Williams?
Okay.
For this purpose, yes.
Gotcha. So we are starting with Mr. Brudnicki, and the question is surrounded the Marina Civic Center. Okay. The city has spent considerable time and money on the Civic Center, with studies still underway to assess the condition of the land to determine its future. If it is safe and usable, what do you think of the options currently being considered to make profitable use of this valuable property?
Well, up until July of last year, we thought that we were going to be getting somewhere based on the FEMA rules, which change. Somewhere between $33 and $70 million to be able to redo the Civic Center on the footprint that it's sitting. After a lot of deliberation, we had engineering reports from 3 different companies telling us that it was at least 58% destroyed. We had tests run on it to make sure that we proved that point. And at the end of the day, it went before 3 arbitrary judges. And 2 out of the 3 said that it was less than 50%. The judge that said it was 58%, or that said it was destroyed, said to those judges in the hearing, they said, "I cannot believe that you are finding this way." So we were pretty devastated. At that time, we were working on several different options of what we were going to do on that property, and now that's all changed because of losing that case with FEMA. So now we are in the process of finding out what it's going to take the building down, weighing that cost against having someone go in there, and if someone can give us a hard price to renovate the building, we may have to be satisfied with less than what we wanted before. But at this particular point in time, we're still we're waiting to find out what it's going to cost to take it down, and then we'll get bids on what it would take to renovate it.
Thank you. And again, I know there was some little alphabetical switches here, but we're going to go with Miss Lewis Williams. Do you need me to repeat the question in regards to the Civic Center? Okay.
I agree with what the mayor just said, and I'll tell you why. Not that I like it, but I agree with it because I'm a retired educator. So I went on a field trip last week to the Panama City city government, and the assistant city manager explained just that to me. So there's not a lot to redress in reference to how it's going to be done. It's where is the money going to come from to do it. Is it going to be private investors? Yes, FEMA did deny. FEMA denied the request that had been put in. So there's not a problem with that other than where is the money going to come from. And I did ask the question, could they
resubmit that, and I believe it's being thought of, but whether they're going to be approved or not remains to be seen. So that ends up being a conundrum for the city, and so it has to be determined how to close that gap, is really what it boils down to. And that is a funding issue, whether it's private investors, which is probably the route to go, is to look at some private investors to come in and assist with that. As with, yes, that way.
Thank you so much. Mr. Rohan.
Can you repeat?
Yes, absolutely. It's in regards to the Marina Civic Center. And the question is, the city has spent considerable time and money on the Civic Center, with studies still underway to assess the condition of the land to determine its future. If it is safe and usable, what do you think of the options currently being considered to make profitable use of this valuable property?
Well, if we're going to keep things from happening over and over again, we need to go back and look at the process here. Our city commission created a huge boondoggle on the Civic Center. 2 insurance companies and FEMA both came in and said, we'll rebuild it for $12 million. Our mayor and the county commission said, no, we want more. We want $35 million. We want to redo this whole thing. So I think right out of the box, we should have understood that that $35 million wasn't going to go. So we've made a big mistake right there. And we can't go back and do anything about it, I don't think. But anyway, everybody needs to understand the city screwed up. As far as what goes on right now, that marina, or excuse me, the Civic Center was built somewhere in 50s, somewhere like that. Anyway, I don't think everybody understands that was built as a bomb shelter. So it's pretty secure. It's got heavy concrete walls. I've been in it actually since the hurricane, and there's not all that much damage. My feeling is that we need to repurpose it, find some way to repurpose it and leave it where it is. I don't know what that purpose would be. We could get builders to come in and look at it and give us some estimates. This is a valuable piece of property. I think it'll cost too much to tear it down. We wasted $70,000 recently to get underground penetrating radar to find out what's underneath it. We have no plans for it. Why are we spending money trying to find out something totally unnecessary? We got to quit wasting money. We got to move forward. It was a big mistake. We got to recognize that.
Thank you.
Okay, this is the second question, and Ms. Lewis Williams, it's for you. This happens to be about the CRAs. There are a host of projects underway with over $3.5 million proposed in the 2023 budget for downtown North, St. Andrews, and Millville. What projects have you or would you support to use the CRA funds?
It's kind of a good question. And part of CRA funds, if I'm not mistaken, also have to do with infrastructure. And one of the reasons I got into this, and I'll just say it, a pothole made me do it. Take a witticism from Flip Wilson. A pothole made me do it. And I believe we need to look at those components within the community. Number 1 is people. Number 2 is transportation. Number 3 are utilities. And number 4 is housing. So we need to look at those components and how we can use those funds. Ms. Lucas elaborated on that. So I don't want to be redundant, but we need to look at how those funds can be used to better the communities, Panama City, those communities in Panama City as a whole, to make life better for the citizens. We now have a department called Quality of Life. I like that phrase because it speaks volumes to what can and should be done for the citizens. And so we need to address those issues.
Thank you. Mr. Brundicki, same question.
The CRA funds, in my estimation, should always be used for capital projects, for things that are going to enhance the assets within a particular community, to make sure that the value stays up, that make sure that people take that money and put it into something where it has long-term value. We have facade grants and things like that, but right now the focus should be on housing, and the focus should be that we take as much of the CRA money as we can and put it into affordable housing within whatever particular CRA it's in, and use that as an incentive to get developers to come in and do that in each particular ward. So that's my answer.
Thank you. Mr. Ryan?
I believe that we should use CRA money for hard concrete projects. And my first spot that I would use the CRA money, I think, would be the Glenwood Rec Center. These people have lost everything in the hurricane. These are people that they need something to do. They need after school activities. They need mentors. They need recreation. So I think Glenwood it's an area that's crying for our help. We need to. CRA can sometimes be a pocketbook to do things, but I think it's a valid pocketbook to use it. Specifically, I would go first for Glenwood. I think that needs to be done. The Glenwood Center. I like the idea of other structures downtown. Perhaps if it would fit, I would use CRA money for both of the marinas. These marinas are who we are. They are who we are in Panama City. This is what people think of when they think of Panama City. If money can be used in that direction, that's where I would go. But I would, like the mayor said, I would try to enhance structures so that would bring people together and activities for people.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan.
All right, along the same lines, and Mr. Rohan, you get this question first, is in business development, in tax specifically. It was turned down by voters in 2021. But what do you believe is the best reason to support or oppose the current referendum for a property tax exemption for new and existing businesses?
I would like to know more about that. I think the idea is you give people tax breaks and then they bring business in. I don't think we've had a good record in the past of bringing people in. In other words, they've come in, they've taken the breaks, and then they've disappeared. So I don't know for sure about the program, but I would look at how it's done in the past. If it's done well in the past, then I would be all in favor of it. I think we would want to look at the company coming in, make sure they were a solid company, and then we want to hold their feet to the fire. If they do something that they weren't supposed to do, we need to be able to go after them. So I'm all for business development. I think it's a great idea. And if we give them a break, they need to give us a break.
Ms. Lewis-Williams.
There's a double-edged sword there when you say that you're going to give businesses an incentive to come here. That may be beneficial, and then again, it may not be. And I know that sounds like doublespeak, but it really isn't. There is a double-edged sword. If you give incentives, you have to be able to ensure for that business is going to function for a period of time in the city. You give them a time lock, if you will. They can't come in one moment and say, I'm leaving in a year's time. The small businesses over the years have always looked for incentives. When their profits start decreasing, they're ready to jump ship and go somewhere else. So I think we have to scrutinize that, look at it very carefully. And I will agree with Dr. Rohan. You have to look at the businesses that are coming in. What is their track record? Have they been viable in other communities? Sometimes they're not. So we have to address all of those issues that encompass incentives for business to come here. This is it's a difficult place to get businesses to come in on occasions, and I've watched it for 34 years. And my degree, I'm not an expert, but my degree is in business administration from Texas Southern University. So I've looked at some of this in this, not only this city, but a couple of other cities. And Panama City is landlocked. The corridors that would bring in a business, we just don't have them. So you have to look at businesses that would have staying power. Thank you. You have to look at business that would have staying power. And that's what we need to address. Is this business going to have staying power in order to give them those incentives? Because if we give them and they don't stay, the city loses.
Thank you. Mr. Brednicki?
I think that we had this in place for many, many years, and it's sunsetted. So in the last election, I believe that it was put on the ballot. I think it was confusing to people, and they were kind of confusing it with some other issue that was going on, and so unfortunately, it didn't pass. But this is very important to have these property tax incentives because, number one, you can set milestones so that they have certain criteria that they have to meet, certain number of jobs, all those different things tie into doing these property tax incentives. And that could come, we have 26 miles of beautiful coastline in the city. We have beautiful weather, but sometimes just one little thing like that can be the difference between bringing in a company that's going to have X amount of jobs that are, that you don't already have in your community. So property tax incentives have been used for years and years. We always used them before, and hopefully the citizens will vote it back in again.
And Mr. Rohan, this question is for you to start. This has to, I'm sorry, Mr. Brett. This has to do with climate change and resiliency efforts. Regardless of why, Florida is set to be ground zero for severe storms. After Hurricane Michael, we should recognize the urgency for weather-hardened infrastructure. What steps are the city taking and should be taking to the resiliency of our infrastructure?
A lot of people do not realize that we lost nearly 1 million trees in the city. And when you talk about, we had a certain number of zones that are like considered flood X zones in the city. And our water table, based on the number of trees that we lost from the Nature Conservancy, has said to us that our water table has probably come up 18 inches in the city of Panama City, because the average pine tree picks up 50 to 75 gallons of water a day, and so many of those trees are gone. So one of the things that's really important is the fact that we're going to be getting $400+ million in state and federal grants and non-interest loans to help redo the infrastructure within the city. When we do that, we're going to build it to the standards that it needs to meet today. We still have orange clay pipe in the ground in Panama City from 100 years ago. So, and you can imagine with the number of trees that we lost, we never had a storm like that before. 125-year-old trees that went down because why? They had a chance to live 125 years. So those roots that got involved in all the different pipes and underground infrastructure was torn up tremendously. So we will build to the standards that we need to today, which is going to be so much better than it was 100 years ago.
Thank you. Ms. Lewis Williams?
Would you repeat that question?
Yes. After Hurricane Michael, we should recognize the urgency for a weather-hardened infrastructure. What step is the city taking and should be taking to the resiliency of our infrastructure?
I don't really have an answer for that, but I'll give you an answer. We need to look at possibly underground utilities, and I don't know that the city is doing that at this particular time. We need to have, it needs to be coated such that it doesn't deteriorate over time. The Hurricane Michael devastated this community. And many of us are survivors. I don't like to call us victims. We're survivors. Anytime you can have a hurricane or winds up to the speeds that will turn over a train, several train cars, there's a problem. And so we weren't prepared for that. We weren't prepared for any of the obstacles that came along with Hurricane Michael. And we're still not. There's still rebuilding going on in this city. The streets, as I said, the thing that got me into this was potholes. And so as I travel the city and look, and part of that devastation from some of the potholes has to do with Hurricane Michael. My understanding is that this city was built on a swamp, and now we're experiencing the ill effects of that. So we need to address hardcore, possibly underground, and even if they're above ground utilities for the people. And I don't see that going on. I honestly do not. then we just need to get we need to put it in place so that the next, possibly, if the next hurricane comes along because of climatic changes, that we'll be better equipped to function in this city. We'll be better equipped to take care of the people within this city. We'll be better equipped to handle a storm of that nature. We really can't, but we'll be better equipped to do it.
Thank you. Mr. Rohan, same question.
Could you repeat it?
Yes.
I think I have the idea, but
Okay. After Hurricane Michael, we should recognize an urgency for a weather-hardened infrastructure. What steps is the city taking and should be taking to the resiliency of our infrastructure?
I think after Hurricane Michael, from what I understand, is all the lift stations went out. So I am also of the understanding now that there are diesel-powered generators at these lift stations. So I think the city has done a good thing there. I mean, you got to get rid of waste, and that's going to be there anyway. So that's good. I think that we're getting a little hysterical about hurricanes. We had a big hurricane, but you got to remember in the 1930s there was a hurricane that wiped out the railroad that went from Miami to Key West. Huge hurricane, a lot of people killed. We had a hurricane in over there in Mississippi. That was a while back. So we're going to have hurricanes, but this isn't anything new. This is climate. This isn't weather. And people we need to quit worrying about that, but we do need a plan for the future. I think we hear a lot about planting trees. Sounds like a good idea, but if the tree's going to do any good, it's going to have to mature. So that means you plant a tree now. That means we're going to be worrying about climate or water from that tree for 30 or 40 years. I don't think that's really reasonable to do that. So underground utilities would be helpful. And a good emergency warning system. A lot of people knew about Hurricane Michael coming, and they knew it was real bad, but it didn't get out to the people. And we have excellent hurricane warning systems now. We can forecast these things. They're pretty accurate on where it's going. It may miss it by 50 miles, but we know in which direction it's going to be, and we know 50 miles one way or the other. So there are things like that we can do. But there's a lot of hysteria about climate change that I think is not accurate, and we need to listen. Some of our big politicians are building right on the water, so they're not particularly worried about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, this is going to be the last question. It will be posed to Ms. Lewis Williams first. And Mr. Rohan, when we go into closings, we'll start with you so that all of you will have had a chance to start equally. And this particular question states, what do you believe Panama City can do or is already doing to foster a more open and accepting multicultural climate within a community of growing diversity and within the city government as well?
That's a tough one. You want to know the truth. No, I'm just being honest with you. It's a tough one. Diversity, that's a buzzword that's used quite frequently to mean acceptance. And we do not always have that. I have seen growth in that area in Panama City in the 34 years I have been here. There have been changes, but diversity is here. It's not in the things that the city may implement. There is a call to be, I heard the mayor of Lynn Haven say, accept everyone. Those words sound very nice. They really sound very nice. I operate on the principle that Jesus had. I love everybody. May not like some of the stuff you do, but I love everybody. Diversity is an individual, in my mind, an individual action that you have to participate in. And when you start doing that, then you can have a coming together and you can have a change. If you don't have like minds, you're not going to get change. You can't legislate. This has been going on for years. You cannot legislate attitudes. It's not going to happen. It has to be an individual thing. Now, the government aspect of it, what do you mean by diversity? Do you mean more people of color in functioning in the government entities? Do you mean more women? There's a whole conundrum that goes on there that has to be answered. So those questions, you can't answer those questions. You have to do it to make it happen. And you're asking me to actually give you a hypothetical answer. I don't have one for you. I'm just going to be quite honest. I do not have a hypothetical answer for you because diversity is here, and that's where it first takes place.
Thank you. Mr. Brednicki, do you need me to repeat the question?
No.
Okay.
I will tell you that I serve as an advisor on a public company board, and I have addressed this issue several different times, and I will tell you that I am more concerned about qualifications than diversification. I think that a person, whatever gender they are, whatever race they are, the most qualified person should be the person that gets the job. And I think that if I am spending taxpayers' money, that the person that is paying those taxes is going to want the best bang for their buck. And they're going to want to get the most value for what they are paying for. It's my job to make sure that I do have the most qualified person to do anything and everything for the city. So I'm not going to adjust my values because of I want the best person that is going to get the most done for the taxpayers' dollars that are spent.
Thank you. Mr. Rohan?
Can you summarize the question?
No, and it's not a long one. It just says, what do you believe Panama City can do or is already doing to foster a more open and accepting multicultural climate within a community of growing diversity and within the city government?
I think like Ms. Williams said, diversity is between our ears to a certain extent, and you can't legislate that. But let's face it, when you start talking about diversity, we're talking about racial discrimination. I know people here that discriminate against blacks. I know blacks that discriminate against whites. And this is an attitude that in time, I think I can see it in time. It's getting better and better, and I think it will. It will continue to get better. But we're always going to have that element of people. I think that when we look let's look at the NFL. The NFL is about 80% black. Now, if you told, maybe more, I'm not sure. I don't watch the NFL anymore since they started standing or kneeling for the national anthem. But anyway, are we going to legislate that we want the NFL, blacks make up 15, 20% of the population? Are we going to turn around and say we want 80% of the NFL players to be white? That's crazy. You put the best player out there, and that's the guy that, it's going to be a guy. There aren't many girls out there. That's going to be the guy that brings home the bacon. You know, he wins the championship. They have the playoffs. They get all the playoff games. They have the the final, and this makes money for everybody. But at the same time, we haven't told them what color those people have to be. And I think I think blacks were discriminated a long time ago. Couldn't go to college. They have all kinds of college opportunities, just like whites now, and they're rising to the top. There are very smart black people that are doing very well, just like there's very good Asians that are doing well, very good Hispanics. So, we're a melting pot, and I think that the pot is melting, but it's rising. The cream is rising to the top, and I'm proud to be part of it. And I think Panama City is a great city that doesn't discriminate in its hiring or anything else. They look, as the mayor said, we look for the best person.
Thank you for your answers. And I remind you, in your closings, we'll start with Mr. Rohan. It'll go to Mrs. Lewis-Williams, and we'll end with Mr. Brednicki. And you only get 60 seconds for your closing. And again, we'll start with Mr. Rohan.
Thank you all for coming. I like to see the election here as put it in a football metaphor. I think we're at halftime right now, and I think the citizens have been creamed. They've been creamed with a tax, the fire tax. This tax is on the back of everyone, even of people that can't afford it on limited income. We've got huge problems with our infrastructure. We've got potholes. We don't really have a plan of putting the infrastructure together that people understand. We need a plan for maintaining the infrastructure and for improving it that everybody knows about. We've also got the marina, and that was a gut kick. The mayor here, he signed a document. I have the document with me right here. He signed a 60-year lease giving 24.5 acres downtown to the St. Joe Company. It's halftime, but I'm ready to start as your new quarterback for the next season, and I can do better. I can do better working for the people in Panama City, so please elect Doc Mike Rowan as your mayor.
Mrs. Lewis-Williams.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation to attend and everyone who stayed to hear what we have to say. As I said, a pothole made me do it. I could not egress or ingress my street, and I became quite annoyed. And sometimes getting into something of this nature, putting both feet into quote unquote politics, annoyance takes place, and I was annoyed. And as I looked around in the rest of the city, I saw potholes everywhere, and there were other issues that came up, quite honestly. There's three things that I noticed: managerial responsibility and integrity, financial and fiscal responsibility and integrity, equalization of all services, which we've talked about quite a bit this evening, for all citizens in this city. So we're looking at, those are my 3 points. Someone told me I had to have 3 points for people to understand. And I told them, I said, that sounds like a Baptist sermon with a joke. You know, and it did to me. I believe that if we treat people fairly, we will get those results. And the people in Panama City deserve fairness.
Mr. Brennan.
There's no substitute for strong leadership and experience. I have led this city through 2 hurricanes, the biggest wildfire that ever hit the state of Florida, COVID-1, COVID-2, and we did such a good job that Governor DeSantis called and spoke to me personally and asked if I and General Mark McQueen would go down to Fort Myers Beach to help them. So we have been battle tested, okay? Now, let me give you some good news, because we're hearing a lot of bad news. Our population for the city of Panama City before the storm was 15 seconds.
60 seconds goes quick.
Okay. Anyway, I'll end with this. The last 4 years, 31% of the properties in the city of Panama City have been purchased. $1.955 billion. Values are up. We are doing something right. New York Times had Panama City as the 8th best city in America to move to. This team of people has done a wonderful job, and we need to keep on doing it. Thank you.
Thank you for your answers, and we'll just have Shelley Clark close out real quick. And we thank you all again for being here so late.
Thank you. Can we give all of our mayoral candidates a big hand, please? Thank you all so very much for coming out this evening. We appreciate that the citizens are interested, and we appreciate that we have candidates. We had 17 candidates that we presented this evening, and so it's a great testament to our community of their interest. You'll be able to find this information. The recording will be posted on our Facebook page. We'd like to remind everyone that Monday, March 20th is the voter registration deadline, that Saturday, April 8th is the last day to request your vote by mail ballot. Monday the 10th through Friday the 14th is early voting, and Tuesday the 18th is election day. Thank Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we will be celebrating Women's History Month with a luncheon on the 25th. Please ask us, and we'd be glad to share information with you to come out and help us.